Chapter 493. Just as Anababa's bony hand was about to touch Thea's shoulder, a dazzling light shot up into the sky, and the dark world suddenly seemed to have an extra ray of light. This was something that the dead once had, this was the power of emotion, this was the light that once bloomed in life. The heavy and harsh environment of the underworld, which had operated for tens of thousands of years, suddenly had some vitality. Many dead people who had fallen for tens of thousands of years recalled their ancient memories. Their filthy eyes shed tears, and their dead bodies seemed to be injected with vitality again. This process was extremely short, but its significance was incomparably far-reaching. Thea finally took out the holy sword when she couldn't bear it anymore. This was a top-level artifact that symbolized the will of all living beings. Just the aftermath of the holy sword itself vaporized Anababa, who was the fuse, so she went all out. Holding the holy sword with one hand, she ran a few steps and arrived in front of the stunned Hades. "Grandson, I've long disliked you." After saying that, she didn't wait for Hades to reply and swung her right hand horizontally. The holy sword sensed her thoughts and knew that she was about to kill Hades. Even if it was just a clone, the holy sword was still very excited. The seven-colored light flashed continuously, and the person and the sword cooperated seamlessly. Hades's head, which was covered in wax, was cut off horizontally. Hades shouldn't be so weak. It was hard to say who would win if the two of them fought fairly. However, his attention was attracted by the turmoil in the underworld. He didn't care about the countless walking corpses, but the strong corpses that he had painstakingly collected were showing signs of going out of control. For example, Aramani, who was good at weaving webs, broke away from Hades' control the moment her self-consciousness returned. She realized that she couldn't rush out of the underworld in a hurry, so she directly activated her innate ability to weave a small world and hid in it. Rebellions occurred one after another. The stronger the creature, the more tenacious its will was. As long as they were given a chance, they could erupt with shocking power. Hades hadn't encountered such a thing for hundreds of millions of years, so he was suddenly caught off guard. He controlled death, so it was said that no one could defeat him in the underworld. This was limited by the rules. Thea naturally couldn't defeat him in the underworld, but there were always exceptions. The brave couldn't defeat the Demon King, but they could seal him. Thea did not need to defeat Hades. She only needed to release a little bit of the free will of the living beings, and she would be able to turn the underworld upside down. In particular, Hades had a hobby of collecting. He had collected many corpses of strong masters from ancient to modern times and awakened them in the underworld to serve him. These people were not much weaker than him when they were alive, and some were even stronger than him. For example, the corpse that he used as a throne was none other than Kronos, the father of Zeus, Hades, and Boston. He was the son of Gaia, the second king of the gods in the Greek pantheon. Until he was overthrown by Zeus, he was the well-deserved leader of the pantheon. The sword of victory and oath had also awakened his own will. In addition, Thea had killed Hades's clone, so the ancient god-king finally woke up from the chaos. The loneliness of hundreds of millions of years made him lose track of where he was. As the son of Gaia, the mother goddess of the earth, he was not an evil creature that was born from a mixture of the will of the giants. Kronos' ability to control the earth was genuine. The god-king did not care whether the underworld was considered earth or not. He directly began to absorb energy from the earth to replenish his dried-up body. Thea really didn't recognize who this giant was. It was just a throne, and she could barely make out the shape of a human. How would she know who this giant was? Not to mention her, even Diana might not know who this giant was. Juniors like them were a little far from the second-generation god-king. However, even if she didn't know who this giant was, as his daughter, Hera, did. That's right, Hera was also his daughter. The relationships in the Greek pantheon were so messy. The skinny man in front of her was her father. Oh my God! Let's run. The noblewoman, who had always valued her elegance over warmth and would never run if she could walk, finally panicked. She pulled Thea and was about to run. In fact, Kronos was not a good person. He was worried that his children would overthrow him, so he swallowed them all into his stomach after they were born. It was not until Zeus showed his might and overthrew him that his siblings were rescued. This tragic memory was not good for Hera. She did not want to stay here for another minute. Thea took a candle from Hades's head. She was deep in thought. Since his head was already chopped off, she could take a few more candles. Hades would not mind, right? She flicked her wrist and put 7 or 8 candles into her bag. As soon as the candle was in her hand, she received a message. Zeus was right. This thing could indeed help her return to her original time and space. She just needed a quiet place to recite a prayer praising Hades. Hey, do you know what this prayer is? She had just chopped off the enemy's head and turned around to praise him. She did not feel any pressure at all. However, Hera was not so thick-skinned. She looked at Thea strangely. There is no need for a prayer. With the help of the candle, I can directly return to my Mount Olympus. She was afraid that Thea would think too much. After that, you can go back on your own. Mount Olympus? So be it. It was better than the current environment. Countless dead souls rushed toward the two. Hades returned again, and his bloody face covered the sky again. At this time, he was so angry that he could not speak. He also knew the characteristics of his candle. He began to control the low-intelligence corpses to attack the two, not giving them a chance to breathe. At the same time, he began to spend effort to suppress the self-consciousness of the strong. If the number was small, he might have succeeded. After all, he was still in control of the Death Priesthood. Unfortunately, there were too many enemies for him to control. Let's not talk about the others. Let's talk about the second-generation king of gods, Kronos. This king of gods was endlessly absorbing power from the underworld. His hatred for Hades was the deepest, and his resistance was the most intense. Even though his own consciousness had not recovered even 1%, his powerful divine power had already begun to surge in the underworld, forcing Hades to divert more than 30% of his strength to suppress him. Hades was struggling to hold on. Thea and Hera cooperated well at this time. The two of them fought their way out. This was the advantage of practicing both magic and martial art. When she cooperated with Diana, she could act as a mage. When she was with Hera, she could act as a warrior. She used magic to form a thin film around her body to block the splashing blood. The Sword of Victory and Pledge could purify these ordinary corpses. As for whether they would be reincarnated or rest forever after the purification, she did not care. At first, the controlled corpses attacked them desperately. Gradually, the situation changed. Many conscious corpses crowded around the two of them and spontaneously separated them from the corpses outside. For example, the Death Knight in front of Thea did not ride a horse. Instead, he pulled the reins and trotted along with them, talking nonstop. "Quick, my consciousness can't hold on. Kill me quickly." The Death Knight stretched his neck and said. Chapter 494. No, save me first. I don't want to stay in this dark place anymore. Let me rest in peace. On the other side, a tribal warrior with a face painted like a ghost swung a spear in his hand and forced back the approaching corpses. Seeing that they had spontaneously formed a circle to isolate all the enemies, Thea was surprised. What's the point of running? Let's just light the candle and retreat. Holding back Hera, who was throwing lightning and fireballs everywhere, the God Queen's reaction was slow, but she was no fool. She immediately understood what Hera meant. Thea tossed her a candle and stared at Hera's every move without blinking. How is this thing going to Olympus? Hera carefully held the candle and closed her eyes to sense it. Her moral values were much higher than what Thea had estimated. She reached out to grab Thea and shouted, "Let's go!" The small space around them began to compress. Obscure energy flashed, and the two were sucked into the space tunnel. The knights and warriors around them who were waiting for their death were stunned at first, but facts spoke louder than words. There were many who understood. Immediately, a warrior jumped into the tunnel. The rest, whether or not they understood what this meant, followed closely behind. Anyway, the situation was already so bad that it couldn't get any worse. Even some of the monsters in the distance who had regained their consciousness saw what was happening here. The half-human, half-spider Aramani, who was hiding in another dimension, shot out countless spider webs from her body and caught 7 or 8 Death Knights who were jumping into the vortex. Using the momentum of the Death Knights, she pulled herself in as well. The remaining monsters were either far away or did not have such means. The moment the vortex was about to close, a Kamala with a lion's head, a goat's body, and a snake's tail crazily rushed in. Pluto's candle didn't waver at all. It opened and came out. Before Sia could react, she was already in a place filled with stars. A towering mountain stood not far away, and waves of divine power attacked her soul. Thea didn't have time to lament. Her supervision allowed her to see a lot of things. At least she knew that she and Hera weren't the only ones who were teleporting. There were a lot of people who were hitching a ride behind them. Hera, who always reacted half a beat too slow, was dragged away. A large group of people fell out of the tunnel. There were knights in black armor, tribal warriors with messy drawings on their faces, and Aramani and the Kamala beast who fell out of the tunnel. "I'm alive. Haha, I can feel the wind again." The undead were all overjoyed. This ending was better than the eternal sleep they had expected. After all, it was better to live than to die. Many people took off their pitch-black armor. Their bodies, which were covered in rotting flesh, regained their vigor. Their strong and powerful hearts began to beat again. By chance, they had crossed the gate of life and death, found a loophole, and returned to the kingdom of the living. Ah! In the past, Mount Olympus had been a desolate place, but now it was filled with unprecedented cheers. "You, how dare you be so presumptuous?" Hera was annoyed. This was Mount Olympus. Zeus was not at home all year round. This was his territory. How could he allow some barbarians to roar here? Just as she was about to scold them, Thea stopped her and whispered, "Your Majesty, listen to me." Hera couldn't ignore Thea's opinion now. She was frightened by the power of the holy sword. She didn't expect that the ultimate weapon of the Celtic gods was still alive. Besides, they had fought together and there was no conflict of principles. She wanted to hear what Thea had to say. But Thea didn't talk about the resurrected people in front of her. Instead, she talked about a more fundamental problem. "Actually, I think you can inherit the position of the King of Gods." "Are you crazy?" "Of course not. You are the closest person to Zeus. Why can't you inherit the position of the King of Gods? Why do you have to give it to Apollo and the others?" Thea had been thinking about the so-called King of Gods position. It was a big trap dug by Zeus. It was more vicious than the ancient 2 peaches kill 3 warriors. In the original space-time, Diana was alone. She thought of a way, which was to expand the scale of the war and pull the Ocean Emperor and Pluto into the whirlpool, trying to fish in troubled waters. Her bait was Hera. Diana looked righteous, but she was actually quite black-bellied when she was scheming. There was no need to go through so much trouble now. Poseidon didn't know, but Hades had offended him. In order to prevent revenge from him, Thea thought of a way to establish Hera. On the one hand, she could resist the huge trap of the King of God's throne. After that, Apollo and the firstborn would be Hera's business. Even if Zeus found out later, he wouldn't have any objections. On the other hand, if Hera inherited the throne, she would definitely need supporters. As long as Hippolyte was a political figure, she would definitely sacrifice part of her dignity to ease the fundamental conflict between the two sides. The enchantment of Paradise Island was destroyed. Now that the location of the island was exposed to the world, it was not a good thing. Hera had prestige, and Hippolyte had manpower. Both sides had the foundation to cooperate. Hera looked at Thea, stunned. Only men can be the king of gods. I have never thought of going beyond that. Your words are too scary. That's all in the past. Now, men and women are equal. Do you think the position of the king of gods is an obstacle to you? Thea felt that there was hope and continued to persuade her. What obstacle? There was no obstacle at all. It was the chair that Hera had been looking at for tens of thousands of years. Apollo and the firstborn had the problem of fighting their way to Mount Olympus, but Hera didn't have this problem at all. This was her home. Ambition existed in the heart of any intelligent life. Hera just didn't think that before. She had been holding the throne of the Queen of Gods for tens of thousands of years. She really didn't think that there was hope for her to be the King of Gods. All kinds of thoughts collided in her mind. What about the position of the Queen of Gods? Thea looked at him with a puzzled look. Zeus, you are just missing, not dead. Your marriage still exists. Hera was thunderstruck. How could this logical relationship be calculated? I am the King of Gods and Zeus is the Queen of Gods? Can't I? Is there a rule in the pantheon against this? Thea asked. In terms of rules, there was no such rule in the pantheon. Not to mention the Greek pantheon, even the Egyptian pantheon and the Celtic pantheon didn't have such a ridiculous rule. As long as you are the King of Gods, you can set rules to restrict Zeus from going out and even issue an oracle to forbid him from leaving Mount Olympus. Thea didn't care where Zeus was now or whether Hera could control him in the future. She came up with a lot of ideas. Chapter 495. The more Hera listened, the brighter her eyes became. If she didn't have to put on the airs of a god queen, she would have pounded her fist on her palm and exclaimed that it made sense. She didn't think so at first, but after listening to Thea's analysis and her own little ambition, Hera suddenly realized that this empty throne of the god of gods might be her only choice to win back her husband's prestige. You're really intelligent, perhaps not inferior to Athena. What's your name? Hera asked seriously. In modern society, it was normal to say one's name first before chatting. However, after interacting with these gods for a long time, Thea also understood some inside information. The lives of mortals were too short, and even demigods could only live a little longer in front of the immortal gods. It wasn't worth their time to remember their names. Leaving one's name proved that it was a special mark in the immortal life of the other party. According to the inherent concept of the gods, this was a big deal for them. The young lady stood up straight and reported her name in accordance with the Greek etiquette. Thea Quinn. Hera nodded silently. Her intelligence was not low either, or it could be said that the gods had lived for so many years, and there were not many idiots. Connecting the dots, Hera could guess that Sia wanted her to be Hades' shield. After all, the era of Kronos had passed. No matter how glorious he was in life, he was already dead. Hades only needed to spend some time to calm the turmoil in the underworld. With Hades' vengeful nature, his next step would definitely not be to apologize. However, Hera wasn't afraid of the underworld king, especially since he treated her like a spoil of war. If she could teach this brother of hers a lesson, the god empress didn't mind being used by Sia a little. Since they were going to fight against Hades, then these guys who had come back from the dead were his loyal minions. Only Mount Olympus and the god of gods would protect them, even after death. Hera knew that she couldn't take back the step she had taken. Thea didn't continue to interrupt, but waited for her to strengthen her confidence. Finally, Hera walked out and stood in front of the cheering crowd. She exuded the dignified aura of a god empress, and the crowd slowly quieted down. What happened next was nothing to write home about. The people who escaped were the elites of their respective eras, and they all had brains. Realizing that Hades would launch a crazy revenge, they immediately hugged Hera's thigh and expressed their willingness to live and die with Mount Olympus. She had hired thugs, but most of them were big and burly, which didn't fit Hera's taste. Furthermore, she wanted all the gods to attend the ceremony. She needed some support to become the divine king, and these fellows were a little unpresentable. At the critical moment, Thea jumped out to help him solve the problem, which was the so-called subjugation of the Amazons. "Oh, you spent so much time and effort just for this." Hera dragged out her words. She finally understood Sia's real purpose for scheming for her. Thea just smiled and didn't explain further. "Okay, as long as the Amazons surrender to me, I'll accept it." It wasn't that Hera was magnanimous, but that Zeus had too many mistresses. If the god empress was angry at them one by one, she would have died of anger. Hera's original purpose was to beat up whoever she saw, and the result of her attack could be summed up with a laugh. It wasn't a big deal to spare Hippolyte among the 180 mistresses. Hera thought clearly that as long as Hippolyte surrendered to her and let her vent her anger, she would let it go. Thea was also worried about the difference in the flow of time between the two worlds. On the one hand, she was afraid that Diana would be worried. On the other hand, it would cause a lot of trouble if Paradise Island was exposed to the world. She asked for the coordinates of the so-called human world, and hurriedly said goodbye to Hera and rushed back to Paradise Island. As for the culprit, Hermes, the two didn't mention anything. Next time, no matter who he was, she would kill him without any nonsense. A white light flashed, and Thea looked around. She was back on Paradise Island. The anti-magic area on the island disappeared, making it much easier for her to find people. She hurriedly saw Diana and quickly flew over. "Thea, you're fine." Diana sensed her as soon as she arrived. The two girls hugged each other passionately. Diana checked her body from head to toe before she was relieved. "Where's that bad woman Hera?" Diana said angrily. Thea smiled bitterly and avoided the topic of bad woman. "How long have I disappeared? Where are Hermes and Apollo? What's the situation outside? Where's Queen Hippolyte?" "You've disappeared for about 10 minutes. The enemies have all run away, but Eris was still there. I don't have any way to contact the outside world. What's going on outside?" Thea had to admit that Diana's way of thinking was not adjusted to a normal person's channel. The existence of Paradise Island was already known to the outside world, but she didn't even realize such a serious problem. Without hesitation, she activated her eternal night, the chosen of the moon goddess. This time, she needed it to block the view, especially the detection of the satellites of various countries. "Quick, let's go see the queen." Thea did not have time to explain. She pulled Diana's hand and went to see Hippolyte. They spent some time healing Hippolyte. When the queen regained consciousness, Thea told her about the current situation on Paradise Island and the solution she discussed with Hera. The development of the matter was exactly as she had predicted. The moral values of political figures were frighteningly low. Hippolyte had no problem bowing to Hera and agreed very quickly. "We have to bow to Hera?" Diana was a little dissatisfied. However, both Hippolyte and Sia thought that it was a good idea. This was equivalent to the Amazons returning to the family of Greek gods. Under this premise, no matter how big her opinion was, it was useless. The valiant goddess of war could only pout to express her dissatisfaction. "You don't have to heal me. Just teleport me over now. I'll admit defeat and apologize." Hippolyte thought deeper. For the sake of Hera, she put herself in a very low position. If she admitted defeat with a weak body, Hera would be more satisfied, right? Thea also expressed her support for her resolution and directly teleported Hippolyte to Mount Olympus. She did not know what the two women talked about. Thea began to build a portal between the two worlds. With thousands of Amazon warriors, the requirements for the portal were not low. The temporary portal was not stable. Under the shroud of the eternal night, the recovery ability of all the female warriors began to increase. Many of them slowly woke up. Diana, Antiope, and the Supergirl who chased after Apollo to no avail began to help treat the wounded. Not long after, Hippolyte came back in high spirit. It could be seen that she had made Hera very happy. Not only did the God Empress heal her injuries, but she also brought back one of the 3 leaves from the giant tree that was said to have borne the golden apple. This leaf could heal all the Amazons. Chapter 496. Thea was envious as she watched the Amazons soak the leaves in the spring water. Each of them only needed to drink a mouthful to heal themselves. Hera had accumulated a lot of wealth over the years. She could remove a leg from the table, or scrape a handful of ashes from the stove, and use them as magical tools. She could make a few divine artifacts by simply dismantling something. From this point of view, Hades and Poseidon were not just after Hera's reputation. Mount Olympus was really rich. If Zeus's treasure vault was included, it would be even richer. Seeing that Hera had healed the Amazon sisters, Diana finally had a good impression of this God Empress. Listen to me, my sisters. It's time for the enchantment of Paradise Island to disappear. I've received Hera's forgiveness. She has allowed us to enter Mount Olympus. Everyone, go back and pack your things. We'll depart immediately. Hippolyte ordered loudly. Thea originally thought that she would give a long speech, but nothing happened. This was the advantage of military management. The leader did not need to explain, and the subordinates did not waste time talking nonsense. At most, they would just say, "Oh," and do as they were told. Everyone quickly went back to pack their things. Are we really going to give up this island? Hippolyte saw that Thea was busy building the teleportation magic circle. She was a little reluctant to give up Paradise Island, which she had lived on for thousands of years. She sent Diana to ask this question. Thea could only answer honestly to her lover's question. Let's send them away first. As for this island, Diana looked at her expectantly. Thea stopped what she was doing. We can't go to war with the human government for this island, right? Diana nodded. She would not rush into the White House with the Vulcan's sword just to leave some memories. She could not do that. Secondly, the world's borders have been fixed. If a large island suddenly appears in the Mediterranean Sea, what will the European countries do? What if the United States wants to build a military base here? What if Russia also wants to get involved? What will the result be? The result should be war, Thea said solemnly. Diana's expression was a little ugly. None of this was complicated. She was not the girl who had left the island back then. 100 years had taught her a lot of things. If a war happened because of her, she would regret it to death. Is there no other way? In order to avoid conflict between humans, I'll ask the Sea King and his wife for help. I think that sinking to the bottom of the sea is the only way. Thea thought of something as she spoke, but in order to tease Diana, she pretended to be helpless. In the end, the war god gritted her teeth and said, "Then let's sink to the bottom of the sea." Sia felt that it was enough and continued, "Magic definitely won't work. Not to mention me, even the ancient archmages wouldn't be able to move such a large island without the help of hundreds of official mages and months of effort. Not to mention, there's also the problem of cross-plane movement. As for the gods, in their heyday, perhaps 5 or 6 of the 12 main gods, excluding the King of Gods, would be able to do it. But in today's era, you must have thought of a way, right? At first, Diana thought that she was explaining the situation, but after listening for a while, she realized that something was wrong. She suddenly realized that her lover had a way to solve this problem that even the gods couldn't. If magic can't solve a problem, we still have science. Thea raised a finger and said proudly, "I'll agree to any condition you have. Hurry up and tell me." Diana looked around and realized that no one was paying attention to her. She whispered slang that only the two of them could understand. "Atomize. Can't we just shrink the entire island?" Back then, the metropolis could be shrunk into a glass cover. Of course, Paradise Island can be shrunk too. When the time comes, you can put it wherever you want. Thea revealed the answer frankly. Diana's beautiful red lips were wide open, and her bright red tongue was faintly visible. She made a sound of awe from her mouth. She really didn't expect that the problem would be solved so easily. The answer was so simple that she wanted to beat Thea up. If it was so easy, why did she bring up the Sea King, the Great Wizard, and the gods? If you have an easy way, you should have told me earlier. Diana stared at her with a fierce face, and Thea laughed. Needless to say, Diana was in a different mood at this time. If it weren't for the wrong time, she would have done something to her. She suppressed the evil thoughts in her heart and continued to set up the teleportation circle. Atomization could shrink a person, but no one knew if this scientific method would cause other changes during the teleportation process. Thea would not rashly gamble with a person's life. If the person was guaranteed to be fine, then everything else would be easy to deal with. Diana told Hippolyte the result. When she suddenly heard that the technology in the outside world had developed to this extent, the Queen was really shocked. She didn't know that this was a kind of black technology. She thought that it was a common technology, and this made her even more determined to go to Olympus. Earth was too dangerous. Although the black fog shrouded the whole island and blocked the detection of satellites, it was hard to say whether it was a good or bad action. The nearby countries discovered the black fog and began to send ships to search. Hippolyte was not to be trifled with. She took out 3 or 4 magic props to help buy time. Some summoned dolphins, some conjured sirens, and several search ships were led astray without knowing it. Half an hour later, the permanent portal across the 2 worlds was completed. It was still very rough, but there was no problem to send the strong Amazons. Many Amazons stepped through the portal with big and small bags and rushed to their new home. Big Sister Sia, can I also go and take a look? Supergirl, who had helped a lot, asked in a fawning manner. Could Kara go to Olympus? Thea was not sure, but she could help ask. When Hera got the news, she was watching the replay of the magic mirror. The replay showed several scenes where Supergirl beat Apollo until he vomited blood and fled. During the battle, she and Thea were fighting magic and didn't pay much attention to Apollo's battle. It was really tragic. In Hera's distant memory, the last person who heard Apollo was Ra, the king of the Egyptian gods. Now that he was going to inherit the throne, he was naturally in a competitive relationship with the ambitious Apollo. When Hera heard that Thea said that Supergirl wanted to visit, Hera agreed without hesitation. As the crowd came and went, Thea also joined the ranks of the outsiders to stop the search. For a great magician like her, it really didn't take much effort to stop some ordinary people. She could find the target with her supervision and cast a long-distance spell to solve the problem. During the break, she didn't stay idle. Atomization still needed to be arranged and even calculated. The sudden disappearance of the island would definitely have some impact on the surrounding coastline. Thea contacted Mira, who was good at controlling water. Chapter 497. The Neptune couple owed her and Diana a lot of favors. When they heard that she needed their help, the two came quickly. Crete will be affected the most, followed by the ports of Egypt and Cyprus. This is where I need your help. Thea showed them the results of her calculations. Paradise Island was a magic island, and it would often swim slowly in the nearby sea. If it suddenly disappeared, the surrounding coastal areas would definitely be affected. When they heard that it was just to smooth the sea, both of them said that it was easy. Whether it was the Neptune's trident or Mira's water control, they could do it easily. When all the Amazons withdrew, Thea began to arrange the atomization equipment. Brainiac's device was too advanced. Even she could not understand the principle, let alone the scientists on Earth. However, Thea was not a pure scientist. She did not want to get to the bottom of it. She directly scanned the image and made a device similar to a ray gun. The specific composition of the ray particles was not easy to estimate. She still used the technology of the Atom Man. Thea directly arranged 5 ray points over the island. When Hippolyte and Antiope left the island and entered Mount Olympus, she and Diana rose into the air and signaled the Neptune couple to get ready. Thea began to control the atomization equipment to operate at low power. Seeing the island slowly shrinking, Diana, who saw the black technology for the first time, was amazed. It was not easy for the gods to do this. After receiving the news that the Neptune couple's seawater was stable, Thea began to increase the power of the ray. 5 minutes later, the whole Paradise Island was reduced to the size of a birthday cake, and Diana was given to her. Thea did not care where she put it. If she wanted to add some fun, she could even put it in the bedroom. Thea put away the atomization equipment, thanked the Neptune couple, and left the scene with Diana. Thea could tell that Diana didn't want to place Paradise Island in Hera's territory, so she didn't force it. She could slowly set up a large magic barrier in the future and put it back in its original position. Magic could also do this, it was just a matter of time and effort. After returning to his own extraterrestrial supervision committee, he sent out a lot of people to investigate the so-called Eastern Mediterranean fog incident. After a quick appearance, he dragged Diana to Mount Olympus. The big show was about to begin. It would be a pity if he didn't go and watch. What did you do? Why do I feel like the urgency in my heart has disappeared? Diana asked. It was her first time coming to Mount Olympus. She felt a sense of calmness that she hadn't felt in a long time. That's right. Thea felt that it was mostly due to Hera's bravery in shouldering the heavy burden and shouldering a lot of Diana's problems. Wonder Woman went from being the key protagonist to a dispensable side character in the following event. As a demigod, she would definitely have some inexplicable premonitions. Haha, isn't this a good thing? Let's go and see Hera first. She's actually not a bad person. Submitting to the God Queen wasn't a difficult thing to say. Diana, who was also a member of the gods, naturally wouldn't be so immature as to get mad at Hera. Although the two didn't meet intimately, they didn't fight either. Mount Olympus, which had been quiet for thousands of years, was very lively today. Hera now had people saluting her wherever she went, which made her feel very happy. According to the Japanese manga, she also found a sense of being recognized. Seeing Diana lowering her head, Hera, who had a big family and business, thought that her armor was too monotonous and a little imperfect. She gave her a red cloak with gold edges, which was a very obvious sign of goodwill. As Thea, who had helped her a lot, Hera naturally wasn't stingy. Seeing that she didn't have a suitable armor, Hera directly opened Zeus's treasury and took out an armor called God's Armor. Looking at the silver-white half-body armor with a blue lining, golden hair, green eyes, and the sword of victory and pledge, Thea felt that she might have taken the wrong script and mixed in some strange things. But it would be a waste if she didn't take it, so she didn't refuse. The two found an empty room to try out the new equipment. Diana's cloak only had some protection against arrows, fire, cold, and acid. With her current strength, the cloak was more for aesthetic purposes. Wearing only armor every day was a little monotonous, especially after knowing Superman, Batman, and the other cloaks. The armor that Hera gave Thea was amazing. It wasn't the same as Toria's, but was made by Zeus himself when he had nothing better to do. In order to deceive girls from all walks of life, Zeus could be said to be proficient in all professions and the kind of top-notch master who had mastered all sub-professions. Casting armor was even easier. Although the defensive ability was amazing, Thea felt that this set of armor was more like a robe than an armor. It could greatly enhance the user's ability to control lightning, provided that they had to have it. Thea didn't have any problem with this. In the past, she needed to mix the energy in her body. Now, as long as different magic was injected into the armor, it would automatically form lightning magic. It was immune to lightning and had a very high resistance to fire, cold, and acid. It also had a certain enhancement in speed. Thea and Diana tried it nearby. The two women's speed was already equal, and Thea was even a little faster. At the same time, it had a significant increase in strength and endurance. The most important thing was that this was a woman's armor with a battle skirt. After so many years in this world, they had seen many artifacts. However, there really weren't many armors, and women's armors were even rarer than Kryptonians. Diana's armor was custom-made, and it was very difficult to find another one. After testing the enhancement of various attributes, Thea's strength finally caught up with Diana's under the enhancement of the armor. She could barely be considered an advanced pseudo-demigod. After confirming the flow of time between the two worlds, they learned that Hera was going to hold a gathering of the gods in 10 days. She would announce her succession to the throne at the banquet. Thea naturally had no objections. She pulled Supergirl, who was having a crazy time, and the three returned to Earth. After sending Supergirl back to school and returning in 10 days, Thea began to learn from each other with Diana. In order to keep Paradise Island, Diana had agreed to all of her requests. After some reluctance, she unlocked quite a few postures. The two of them felt as if a huge burden had been lifted off their shoulders, and they lived happily for a few days. As for Zola, who had been kidnapped by Hermes, Diana just thought about it and put her aside. She would take care of it, but Hermes was nowhere to be found. She couldn't do anything about it even if she wanted to. Diana, who had been with Thea for many years, was much more realistic compared to the original spacetime. She only knew Zola, and they weren't even friends. Diana couldn't go all out to find Zola for her. Chapter 498. Although 10 days were short, Thea still took some time to do something big. She gathered a few capable people in the Batcave for a meeting. Thea, Diana, Superman, the Martian Manhunter, and Batman. Now, this loose circle was starting to resemble the Justice League. Let's call it version 0.1 of the League. I've called you all here for one thing. Thea went straight to the point. Considering the pressure and danger in the real world, I'm going to strengthen Louise Lane. Her earth-shattering words almost made Superman, who was drinking water beside her, bite his tongue. Why are you doing this? Batman, who had investigated Superman's 8 generations of ancestors, naturally knew Louise. He just wanted to know why Thea did this. Was there a need to say it? Louise Lane's death directly triggered the plot of the League of Injustice's God on Earth. Her influence on Superman was too great. At first, Sia didn't take it seriously, but on Mount Olympus, she finally realized that treasures that could resurrect the dead were extremely rare. Even Hera only had 1 or 2. Considering their bad relationship with Hades, it would be very troublesome if they died now. Only God knew how the Owl Court had managed to save Yao Fei. Over the years, they had conducted hundreds of experiments according to the procedure on that day. Unfortunately, none of them succeeded. What's more, without the pool of Lazarus, it would be difficult for Yao Fei to wake up even if he became a vegetable. But Louise Lane was a suicidal person. She appeared in all kinds of dangerous places without any protection. One day, she might die if God didn't pay attention. That was why Thea proposed today. You asked me why. Thea faced Batman's question. She didn't care that Superman was beside her. She pointed at Superman. I'm worried about him. If Louise dies, his bottom line may not be able to stop him. What should we do then? Are we really going to use kryptonite against a noble friend? Batman pulled a long face and didn't say anything. In fact, that was what he was thinking. It was just that there was no need to say it out loud. Superman was also dejected. He didn't know what he would do if it really happened. How are you going to strengthen her? The Martian hunter naturally knew Louise Lane, but he didn't want to get involved when it came to Superman. There are only a few types of strengthening: genes, magic, and equipment. Actually, you misunderstood. I just want Louise to have the ability to protect herself. I don't want her to be a superhero. What a joke. Wouldn't it be more dangerous for Louise to become a hero? If she had the ability, she would have gone to interview Darkseid instead. Although it involves me, I support it. Superman didn't know what choice he would make in the end, but it was always right to take precautions in advance. Louise is a woman filled with a sense of justice. She should be able to protect herself. Diana spoke up at the right time. With 3 votes in favor, the Martian Manhunter and Batman couldn't think of any reason to object. There was no doubt that Louise was a righteous person, and Batman, who was so paranoid that he almost became a cancer of suspicion, was also certain of this. How to strengthen her? Thea looked at Batman, who waved his hand. My martial arts aren't suitable for her. Actually, what I meant was to let Batgirl or Black Canary train her. I don't want her to be very strong, but she should at least be able to resist a few blows. Also, Thea threw a teleportation gem to Superman. I made this teleportation gem. The teleportation location is set at Supergirl's apartment. Louise's defense is too weak. I think we can gather our strength to make her a set of armor. Gathering everyone's strength to make armor. This idea naturally came from the Hellbat armor, but there was no need for Louise to fight her way to Apocalypse Star. There was no need for it to be so powerful. Superman was certain that this was a good idea, and they split up to do some work. The task of measuring the body was given to Superman to build the shell on the star. Diana did the post-production enchantment, Batman installed various electronic components, and the Martian Hunter installed the anti-heart control module on the helmet. Finally, Thea atomized it to make it easier to carry around. In order to prevent this reporter from going further and further down the road of death, the 5 capable people, including Superman, all tacitly agreed not to make any weapon systems. This armor could be said to have 0 attack power, and its defense and speed were maxed out. Presumably, as long as Louise didn't have a death wish, she would still be safe. After much consideration, the training work was given to Barbara. Excluding Thea, who was an unconventional combat power, Batgirl Barbara could be said to be the role model of the younger generation of heroines. Whether it was her intelligence or her martial arts, she was outstanding. She was full of righteousness, and she must have a lot in common with Louise. After dealing with Louise, Thea and Diana rushed back to Mount Olympus. The naive Supergirl was naturally dragged along. This little girl's energy had increased by at least 30% after the battle with Apollo. Now, Thea and Diana couldn't suppress her without using their full strength. When they returned to Mount Olympus, the environment was still the same, but the atmosphere was much more lively than before. Hippolyte wisely retreated to the second line, and all the Amazons were led by Antiope. This strict female warrior was loyal to her duty and never showed favoritism, which won Hera's praise. In addition to the Amazons, Mount Olympus had another force, and that was the elites who had escaped from the underworld with Thea and Hera. Their structure was loose, but under the strong pressure of Hades, they still submitted to Hera and elected the half-human, half-spider Ahriman as their leader. With these 2 forces in hand, Hera constantly balanced the relationship between the 2 sides. The taste of power intoxicated her, and she would not give up the position of the King of Gods even if you asked her to. In addition to the 3 women, the first to arrive was unsurprisingly the goddess of strife, Eris. This goddess came and went without a trace. Wherever there was strife, she could be seen. Following closely behind the goddess of strife was Thea and Diana's old friend, Ares. Compared to the elegant middle-aged man during the First World War, the god of war now looked older. His face was full of age spots and his beard reached his chest. He was also dressed in rags, but the only thing that was pleasing to the eye was that he no longer pretended to be a cripple. The old god of war looked like Hera's grandfather from afar. In fact, he was the biological son of Hera and Zeus, but the world was used to dividing good and evil according to their own understanding. As the son of the great evil and jealous Hera, Ares was also cursed a lot, and no matter what, he was all blamed on the god of war. The people who cursed him included Hippolyte and Diana. Thea sometimes maliciously thought that Diana must have said a lot of bad things about Ares behind his back before she became a martial artist. Chapter 499. Not long after, the severely injured Apollo also arrived at the scene. The sun god saw the Supergirl at a glance and shrank his neck, not daring to explode. He found a place to sit down. Not long after he sat down, the fire god Hephaestus, the god of wine Dionysus, and the goddess of agriculture Demeter arrived one after another. The god of wine looked normal, and his appearance was a slightly handsome young man. The fire god's appearance surprised Thea. The artistic style, blurred eyes, and defined muscles that she imagined were all absent. This Vulcan looked short and stout, almost like a chimney. His skin was very rough, like a severely burned patient. His skin was red with a tinge of black, and his mouth was full of big fangs. He could play the role of a monster in Journey to the West if he changed his clothes slightly. The remaining goddess of agriculture looked like a treant. Her skin was dry and withered, and she looked old and tired. Hermes, who was secretly in cahoots with her, did not come, which made Thea a little regretful. She did not know where the god of speed and thieves had gone. Whether it was using her supervision or Croydon's compass, she could not find any trace of him. The moon goddess Artemis was still sleeping in her god's kingdom. With Thea's help, her power of faith was much more abundant than in the original time and space, so there was no need for her to come out. The god of strength, Hercules, had always been at odds with the Olympian gods, and Hera did not know that he was still alive, so she did not invite him. As the first gathering after the twilight of the gods, the sun god Apollo, the god of war Ares, the goddess of strife Eris, the goddess of agriculture Demeter, the fire god Hephaestus, the god of wine Dionysus, and Hera. There were a total of 7 gods with different motives. Thea pulled Diana and watched from afar. She was full of malice, waiting to watch a good show. When Hera was about to inherit the throne of the god of gods, the expressions of these gods would be very interesting. As for going up and asking for a seat among the gods, she was not so ambitious. It was not easy to get herself and Diana out of the picture. Jumping in again? Wouldn't that be crazy? Standing for a while would not kill anyone. Hera didn't disappoint her. After chatting with the gods for a while, they finally got to the main topic of the day. Zeus has been missing for a long time. The majesty of the Greek gods cannot be ignored. As your mother and queen, I have the responsibility to shoulder this burden at the critical moment. Hera paused to observe the gods' reactions. After living for such a long time, the gods were no fools. As the nominal mother, Hera's words were a little strange, but they couldn't figure out what was strange about it. Apollo, who had been thinking about how to kill the Supergirl, turned his attention to Hera. The sun god didn't know what Hera meant by saying those words. Feeling that she had never attracted so much attention before, Hera solemnly said an earth-shattering sentence, "I want to inherit the throne of the divine king." What? Did I hear it wrong? Apollo's head mechanically looked at the god of wine, who was sitting on his left, and found that he also had a dull expression. Apollo then looked at the goddess of strife on his right. Eris, who used to laugh and scold the gods, was staring at Hera in a daze. Apollo finally realized something and flipped the table in front of him. Nonsense. The throne can only belong to me and only to me. Apollo, who was so angry that he almost forgot his surname, was not bragging. Divine power surged all over his body in all directions. His eyes, ears, mouth, and nose emitted scorching flames at the same time. It was obvious that he was furious. Hera was a little scared. If not for the firstborn, Apollo's combat power was definitely the strongest among the gods. Fortunately, the queen now had a way to restrain him. She waved behind her. Thea quickly pushed the Supergirl, who was watching the show attentively, out. Hera gave this girl a divine bracelet that could store the energy of the sun, so she should at least show some appreciation. Why was she watching the show? Supergirl wasn't stupid either. She quickly reacted and stood in front of Hera with her indescribable object, preparing to continue absorbing the energy of the human-shaped yellow sun. Apollo saw her interfering, and his heart went cold. At this time, he still didn't know about the existence of the Kryptonians. He only felt that the woman in the red cloak was completely out of his control. No matter how the sun god thought, he couldn't think of a countermeasure. Huff! Apollo breathed heavily, forcibly suppressing the anger in his heart. He wanted to leave in a huff, but he also wanted to see if there was anything he didn't know about Hera's ascension to the throne of the Divine King. His body felt as if it was pressed down by a heavy weight, and he slowly sat back down. Who is in favor of me inheriting the throne of the Divine King? Who is against it? Hera was very happy to see that Apollo was defeated, and asked loudly for the opinions of the gods. The rest of the children were a little bit shocked. Even Vulcan, who had always paid attention to forging and was indifferent to everything else, was a little dumbfounded. His mouth was full of sharp teeth, so big that a football could be stuffed in. Diana was also a little shocked. Thea told her the whole story, of course, without the various versions of Zeus and Athena's schemes. Diana, who had always been committed to the equality of men and women, immediately accepted this explanation. Who said that the Divine King must be a man? It was also possible for the Divine King to be the Divine King. Then what did you do to Zeus? Demeter, the goddess of agriculture, asked. She was also a descendant of Kronos, and was the sister of Hera, Zeus, and Hades. She was considered an elder among the gods. Unlike Thea's suggestion, Hera didn't change into a queen and then a king, which was too scary. She chose a safe way to deal with it, which was to play Tai Chi with Demeter. Her words were ambiguous, and after a long time, she didn't say a word of truth. The rest of the gods didn't say anything. What else could they say? Hera wasn't alone at the scene. If the soft approach didn't work, then the hard approach? Hera now had at least 1,000 followers on Mount Olympus. Her few gods had a high level of life, but in terms of combat power, they couldn't be compared to 1,000. Except for the sun god and the old god of war, whose combat power was super strong, the rest of the gods didn't have a strong clergy. Blacksmiths, brewers, and farmers, no matter how you looked at it, they couldn't beat Hera and her followers. They all bowed their heads and didn't say a word, pretending to be cowards. Hera was overjoyed. She immediately walked slowly to the high platform under everyone's gaze, which represented the supreme throne of the Divine King, as if waiting for the birth of a new lord. Hera didn't know if she could be accepted, but the situation didn't allow her to choose. She turned her back, lifted her peacock feather coat, and sat down steadily. The resistance she imagined didn't happen, but the throne didn't welcome her either. What was going on? Just as Hera was feeling suspicious, some changes happened. Her crown was replaced by a crown, and her empty hands had a scepter that symbolized power. The silent sky seemed to be playing some kind of music to celebrate the birth of the new king of Olympus. Chapter 500. After a few similar sounds, the sky became completely silent. Apart from that, there was nothing else. Why was it so quiet? The gods and Hera had all seen the power of Zeus. It was really the same color as heaven and earth, and the sun and the moon competed for glory. Why was the reaction of heaven and earth so faint when Hera inherited the throne? Were you going to admit it? The movement was too small, and it was a little fake. Were you going to deny it? The crown and scepter were given to Hera, and heaven and earth even celebrated a little symbolically. This kind of result made the gods a little confused. Only Thea knew that Zeus was still alive. Now, Mount Olympus probably only recognized Hera as a substitute. It was equivalent to the position of the crown prince in the past. She definitely had the power, but it was still a little far from the official succession. No matter what, Hera had inherited the throne. No matter how dissatisfied Apollo was, he was in no position to speak. The sun god slammed the door and left angrily. The rest of the gods more or less had some expectations of the god king, but now they were all like frosted eggplants, and they left with gloomy expressions. Even the goddess of strife, Eris, who was usually full of herself, could not figure out what had happened in such a short time. But there was one thing she was sure of. The throne of the god-king was settled, and the disputes of the gods were forcibly suppressed. As the goddess of strife, the foundation of her existence disappeared. Eris walked out with light steps, as if she had encountered a disaster, and her expression was blank. Thea also took Diana and Supergirl to bid farewell to the high-spirited Hera. Hermes has surrendered to the underworld, but Hades's trouble still exists. You have to be careful. Before leaving, Hera kindly reminded them. As the person who had the best relationship with her, Thea expressed gratitude to the new God King on behalf of the others. She was not very worried about Hades. These gods in Mount Olympus and the underworld were indeed immortal. However, they could be killed as soon as they entered the so-called human world. Hera's words meant that she couldn't stay out of it. If Hades was in trouble, she had to come and help. Thea felt that Hades might not even know who she was. At most, he would use the holy sword as a clue and secretly hate the Celtic gods. Now that everyone was dead in their own god's kingdom, it would be extremely difficult to go to each other's home to cause trouble. With Hades's forbearing character, he would not carry out any thunderous actions. The priesthood of Pluto determined that no one could escape death, so he was not in a hurry at all. No matter who offended him, they would fall into his hands one day. He had followed this core idea for tens of thousands of years, and he would not make an exception for Thea. The young mistress was very relieved as she brought Diana and Supergirl back to Earth. After bidding farewell to Supergirl, who had gone back to school, she went home with Diana to unlock new positions. No one knew how long it would take for Zola and the Zeus Smuff in her stomach to be born. This had nothing to do with Thea. As for the firstborn, it was even more troublesome for Hera. If the firstborn had any brains, he would not challenge Hera, who had all the advantages. Therefore, in short, this low-level version of the Battle of the Gods was going to end before it even started. Thea spoke on behalf of Diana. Our goal was the new god, not the broken god of war. We don't care. Everything was back on track. Those who were supposed to go to school went to school, and those who were supposed to go to work went to work. The fog in the eastern Mediterranean had become one of Earth's unsolved mysteries. Neither the Heaven's Eye Society nor Thea's committee managed to find any inside information. Their subordinates wrote the report without knowing what was going on, and their leaders signed it for the record. The matter had finally come to an end. Thea looked at the invitation in her hand and threw it back on the table. It was an invitation from the Advanced Technology Laboratory in Central City, inviting people from all walks of life to observe the official operation of the particle accelerator. As an authority in the field of genetics, the young mistress was now a big name in the scientific community. In addition, she had a good relationship with the Advanced Technology Laboratory, so Reverse Lightning, who was disguised as Dr. Harrison Wales, had also sent her an invitation. The particle accelerator is about to be activated. Thea looked at the gloomy sky outside the window. Her gaze flew out of the metropolis and saw Central City in the distance. If the metropolis was said to have turned from sunny to cloudy, then Central City was completely cloudy. If one did not know the truth, they would definitely say that Dr. Harrison Wales was crazy to conduct an experiment in such weather. The scientific community was generally not optimistic about Dr. Wales' experiment. His so-called future was about to open, changing the understanding of physics, bringing about the advancement of dynamics, and making unprecedented breakthroughs in human medicine. Most of the scientists felt that Dr. Wales was under too much pressure and that there was something wrong with his brain. What nonsense was this? There were people who mocked and ridiculed him, people who tried their best to persuade him, and naturally, there were also people who were envious and jealous. Thea learned from Gideon that Reverse Lightning was so excited that he was about to jump up and down. He had painstakingly prepared for 15 years and was about to bear fruit. He had never been so clear-headed before. If she had just arrived in this world, Thea could still go to the scene of the particle accelerator explosion and maybe get an ability or something if she was lucky. Unfortunately, Thea's level was now too high. If she was given an ability that was incompatible with the current system, she would have to go through a lot of trouble to split her soul and cut it out, which would be troublesome. It just so happened that the scientific community was boycotting this experiment, so she went with the flow and asked her assistant to call and decline the invitation. Diana wasn't interested in these scientific matters and went to work on her foundation, while Thea stayed at home alone to watch TV. Sure enough, it rained heavily that night. People from all walks of life called Dr. Wales and advised him to postpone the experiment. Reverse lightning acted out the image of a paranoid and crazy scientist very well. A few cities away, Thea could see reverse lightning roaring into the phone. His expression was full of his love for science and his desire to know the truth. If there was a ranking of the acting skills of these heroes and villains, if Reverse Lightning said that he was second, no one would dare to say that they were first. The old guy's acting skills were really too good. Other than Thea's supervision, who could see him through the phone? He pretended to be conflicted and mixed with all kinds of complicated emotions. When his acting skills exploded, even he himself would believe it. With this deep acting skill, even if he didn't have the power of speed, Reverse Lightning would probably be able to win an Oscar, right? The rain outside the house was getting heavier and heavier. Not only the scientists in the field of physics, the citizens and reporters outside the cutting-edge laboratory, but even the staff inside the laboratory began to persuade Dr. Wales to postpone the experiment. In such bad weather, it was too easy for accidents to happen. Reverse Lightning sneered in his heart. The sun is bright, why would I experiment? What I want is an accident. Once again, despite the opposition of the crowd, he forcibly started the particle accelerator. Thea could see a trace of nervousness from his subtle expression. Whether he would return to the original spacetime and live a good life or wait for death in the 21st century, it all depended on this trembling. In the pouring rain and waves of opposition outside, Reverse Lightning started the particle accelerator. Chapter 501. The huge underground facility began to operate, and a huge amount of electricity from Central City was injected into the particle accelerator. Reverse Lightning's calculations were very accurate, and there were no malfunctions in the early and middle stages. This made the people in the laboratory feel a little relieved. However, when the energy began to run wildly, and the particle accelerator entered the 45th minute, the operation of the equipment reached a critical value. Several monitoring devices emitted rapid red beeps, and the people in the laboratory fell into an abyss. It was too late to stop it now. Reverse Lightning pretended to be dumbfounded, and a few young people volunteered to manually turn off the equipment at the bottom. Thea recognized the young people, Ronnie Raymond, Cisco Ramon, and Caitlin Snow. However, the huge energy of the particle accelerator interfered with her vision, and their figures were very blurry. Their noble act of self-sacrifice did not change the fact. Although they cut off the energy supply system of the particle accelerator, the accelerator, which had reached full capacity, began to shrink rapidly and completed the whole process of shrinking to a total energy explosion in 3 seconds. The orange energy soared into the sky, and the thick clouds were scattered. Countless debris were swept into the air, and the shock waves swept in all directions. The crowd outside the cutting-edge technology laboratory began to flee in all directions. No one knew what was going on, and they only felt that they had lost 2 legs. Thea was just about to look at the Central City Police Station to see Barry Allen, who was preparing to be struck by lightning, when she suddenly saw darkness in front of her. Something was affecting her vision. When she retracted her gaze and looked at the Central City Police Station again, she found that Barry Allen was lying in a pile of debris, and small lightning kept flowing under his skin. Just as she was about to take a closer look at the famous power of speed, the urgent sound of the phone interrupted her vision again. Was there really something in the dark that was hindering her? She picked up the phone and found that it was a call from Felicity. She picked up the call lazily, and before she could say anything, she heard sounds like a battle. There were sounds of bowstrings, gunshots, and something that Sia couldn't make out was broken. Realizing that something had happened at Green Arrow, she immediately hung up the phone and teleported to Star City. When they arrived at the Green Arrow shooting club, Sia was shocked. Felicity, who was hiding under the table, and Oliver and Tommy, who were jumping up and down to shoot arrows, did not surprise her. What she was surprised about was the opponents they were facing. It was a young woman with black eyes and a head of white hair. Her hands were constantly shooting icicles, ice arrows, and frost rays. Isn't this Caitlin Snow? Or rather, why was the Frost Killer at Green Arrow's place 3 years later? Caitlin did not look like she came from the future. Caitlin's clothes were exactly the same as what Thea saw 3 minutes ago. However, Caitlin's eyes were lifeless, as if she had fallen into an illusion. Her attack was more like a self-defense mechanism. I'll deal with her. Thea stopped Oliver. The Frost Killer could absorb the surrounding heat, but Oliver liked to exercise shirtless. At this time, he was really cold. He was used to fighting with Hera's magic, so it was like bullying to deal with a mutant. She could use mental shock to deal with the Frost Killer in its normal state, but at this time, the Frost Killer had already fainted. No matter how strong the mental shock was, it would be useless. Fire and water magic had no effect on her. In any case, she was a good friend, and Thea could not be too harsh on her. She could only cast 3 hold spells in a row to immobilize her movements, and then knock her out with a karate chop. This is Caitlin, right? How did she get here? Thea asked Felicity, who had crawled out from under the table. Frost Killer versus Green Arrow? This was like Central City's elite monster versus Star City's novice village chief. How did the two of them fight? Felicity did not know the truth. She was writing some software when she heard Oliver telling her to run. She ran, but unfortunately, the ground was frozen with a thin layer of ice, and she fell hard. After that, she hid under the table and called for Thea's help. I think she teleported here. It's a bit like your teleportation gem. Oliver put on a jacket and said as he recalled. My teleportation gem? How did Caitlin get my gem? Thea did not remember being so kind as to make one for everyone she knew. I think I gave her one. Felicity scratched her head and said embarrassedly. Thea closed her eyes and carefully checked the residual energy waves in the air. She came up with a guess. This place was different from the original dimension. Caitlin and Ronnie entered the underground facility at the same time, and they left Psyker to guard outside. Unfortunately, the explosion still happened. At the critical moment of life and death, the young man and woman probably put on a show of life and death together. After that, it should be the end of the tragedy. Ronnie let Caitlin use the teleportation gem and sent her to Star City. Between life and death, the slightly cowardly Caitlin didn't know what to do. Furthermore, due to the explosion of the particle accelerator, the dimensional barrier was broken, various dark matter fused with her cells, and a new personality with powerful superpowers began to awaken. This was the Frost Killer. Originally, she would have slept for a long time, like Barry Allen, who slept for 9 months. The changes on the cellular level would take a long time. However, after the Frost Killer was teleported away, her new personality was very weak and sensitive. She was stimulated by the murderous aura of the various arrows in the Green Arrow and went on a rampage. Thea felt that her guess was not far from the truth. If she gave Caitlin a new treatment now, she would become a completely different Frost Killer in the future. She warned Felicity not to give away the things she gave her before returning to her lab with Caitlin. A large amount of nutrient solution was injected into her body, but there was no good treatment for this new personality. Emotional energy could help the two personalities merge again. Caitlin was not good at other emotions like hope, compassion, and courage. She was good at playing with fear, so there was no need to directly inject a large amount of fear into the new personality. The new personality's strength was relative. This personality's perception of the world was still very blurry. Now, facing the abyss-like fear, it only managed to resist for a short while before collapsing. Helplessly, it woke up the old personality that was hibernating and silently began to merge again. Thea was very satisfied. The two were originally of the same origin, so they could merge and influence each other. Soon, they would merge again. She did not look at Caitlin anymore. Instead, she studied her own condition. Originally, she thought that she would be fine as long as she stayed far away from the scene. She didn't expect that when the particle accelerator exploded, all kinds of substances from different dimensions would appear one after another. During this process, some unknown substances would combine with her gaze, causing some inexplicable strange changes. Chapter 502. After some simple tests, she found that the basic functions of both eyes were still present. X-ray vision, telescopic vision, and additional fear emotion. By injecting a large amount of emotional energy in a short period of time, she could also create a heat ray similar to the Kryptonians. She could use it occasionally but not for a long time. It would consume a lot of emotional energy. Back then, Thea had emitted a yellow light. Now, her eyes were the same color as her eyes. The ray had turned green. Most importantly, the ray was no longer a straight line. Instead, it could turn at will according to Thea's will. Is this going to be an omega ray? Heidi scratched her head. Other than the ability to turn, she couldn't figure out any other function for the time being. After studying for a long time, she still couldn't figure it out. She could only think about it later. Caitlin slept in her high-tech medical cabin for 3 days before she woke up. This was not the kind sold on the market. It was prepared by Thea for her family and friends. As long as they didn't die on the spot, they could be saved. Where am I? Caitlin looked around. She had never been here before. Her mind was in a mess. Thea waved her hand in front of her face. Do you remember me? Caitlin stared at her for a long time before she remembered. Thea. Yes, it seems that your memory is recovering. That's good news. I remember. I was in a cutting-edge laboratory. Then, Ronnie? Who's Ronnie? Caitlin rubbed her white hair desperately. Her face was full of pain and confusion. Thea roughly explained the situation at that time, leaving out all the guesses. In the end, she said, the two personalities merged. Although this is still you, it's like a new personality accepting the memory of the past. The old Caitlin doesn't exist anymore. Thea had a good impression of the old Caitlin. She was honest, kind, responsible, and full of good points. Her current personality was actually formed based on her old personality. The good parts were basically inherited, but the influence of the Frost Killer was still unavoidable. Her gaze was always cold, and it was a sharp contrast to the Caitlin who used to treat everyone warmly. As for Ronnie, he should be your fiancé. I don't know much about him, Thea said as she showed Caitlin some photos and videos. These were the results of Gideon's searches from various regions. He had ordered them to be made into a short film, and replayed Caitlin's life experience in video form. Needless to say, the effect was not bad. Caitlin was already enlightened before it finished playing. Oh, I remember now. Ronnie is my fiancé, and you're my best friend, Caitlin confirmed. Thea felt a little choked. Their relationship could only be said to be ordinary. How could they talk about this? After asking a few questions in a roundabout way, Thea suddenly realized that in order to integrate her personality, she had instilled a little too much fear. In the fused subconscious, Caitlin had some kind of effect similar to Stockholm Syndrome. Coupled with the fact that the two of them were friends, under the intense fear, the new personality automatically came up with the illusion that the two of them were best friends. It was a little exaggerated to say that it was an illusion. No matter what the truth was, the two of them were good friends. This was the basis of the integration of the new personality. If this was denied, Caitlin's new personality would not be mentioned. That's right. You're a very good friend of mine. A very good assistant. Thea's tone changed as she spoke. After all, when she first introduced Fiora as her adjutant, Diana had been suspicious for a while. This friend could easily cause a lot of confusion. Her personality was still very young. A lot of memories were instilled in her mind. Caitlin did not care about the difference between the two terms. As long as they were related, she accepted the role of an assistant. Caitlin moved a little on the spot, and the temperature in the room began to drop rapidly. Caitlin seemed to know that she was in trouble and quickly stopped. It was not good to be too strong. She could not control it at all. Thea directly used magic to seal the few channels in her brain that controlled her ability. Afraid that she would be in danger because of the seal in her body and could not use her ability, Thea gave her a replica light ring. This replica light ring had two functions. The first was to hide the existence of the ring. The second was to temporarily open the seal in Caitlin's body. As for her white hair, there was no need to hide it. She had disappeared for 3 days. There had to be an explanation. Yes, Thea planned to let her return to reverse lightning. There were still 9 months until Barry Allen woke up. Although the alias Dr. Wells had a bad reputation, reverse lightning had at least gotten rid of the public's attention. Who knew if he would obediently stay for 9 months? If he did something wrong, Thea would be in a passive position. She told Caitlin that no matter what reverse lightning asked, she did not know. If he mistakenly thought that Caitlin had awakened a teleportation ability, that would be fine. Thea made up more than 10 excuses on the spot and asked Caitlin to memorize them so that she could improvise in the future. She also asked Gideon to simulate reverse lightning's thinking and behavior. After a few tests, Caitlin played the role of a frightened young woman perfectly. Whether it was frowning and saying that she did not know, or thinking hard but could not get an answer, Caitlin, who was no longer obedient, played the role very well. Not long after Caitlin returned, she sent back a new message. Reverse lightning only asked a few questions about her whereabouts and gave the whole laboratory a long vacation. They could stay or leave at will. He was also busy playing the role of a middle-aged scientist who had been tortured mentally and had his conscience whipped. Just like in the original timeline, Reverse Lightning was now in a wheelchair and pretending to be a cripple. Every day, he used his weathered face to face accusations and questions from all sides. One day after Caitlin returned to Central City, Thea and Olivier also came to Central City's cutting-edge technology laboratory. The siblings were here to visit Barry Allen. Barry's adoptive father, Joe West, knew that Thea was one of the rare scientific masters in the medical field. He spent a lot of favors and beat around the bush to get to her door. Olivier happened to know about this as well, so the siblings came to visit Barry. "Dr. Quinn, come and take a look. The people in the hospital said that Barry is dead. There is no heartbeat, but the people in the laboratory said that he is still alive." The tall and strong middle-aged black man, Joe West, really treated Barry like his own son. He was afraid that the people in the cutting-edge technology laboratory would do something to him, so he stayed with Barry for 4 days. "Please call me Thea. I will take a look at his condition first." Thea nodded to Joe West and Barry's childhood friend, Ayers West. Barry had always liked her, but she did not realize it. This girl was really slow, but their relationship was really good. Chapter 503. Ayers' eyes were red from crying, and her voice was hoarse. She nodded and moved aside. It was definitely not appropriate for her to use the magnifying healing spell directly. Even if no one was watching, she could not do anything overboard, not to mention that Reverse Lightning was watching from somewhere. Fortunately, Dr. Thea was a medical giant, and she was familiar with all the medical equipment. Many of the cutting-edge technology in the laboratory were even developed by the Quinn Group. After a serious and responsible check, Sia began to understand. She couldn't see anything wrong with Barry. Magic could forcefully wake him up, but the consequences would be very, very serious. She didn't want to risk her life with a group of people who were extremely fast at different times. Mr. West, please rest assured. It's not that Barry doesn't have a heartbeat, it's just that his heartbeat is too fast for the machine to detect. His body is undergoing a very strange change. His cells, bones, lymph nodes, muscles, and even his skin are undergoing earth-shattering changes. Thea's words were very certain. As the winner of the Nobel Prize in Medicine, no one in the world would dare to refute her conclusion without verifying it hundreds of times. Joe West, who had been a police officer for half his life, naturally did not doubt her. However, he still asked with doubts, "Then, when will Barry wake up?" Thea pretended to calculate and came up with the final answer, "In 9 months." After a brief conversation, the siblings bid farewell to the father and daughter, who were slightly relieved. They then went to see the owner of the laboratory, Reverse Lightning, who was disguised as Dr. Wales. In order to compensate the victims, Reverse Lightning sold all the assets of Dr. Wales to pay for the sky-high compensation. Now that he had dismissed everyone, he really treated the laboratory as his home. "Doctor, please restrain your grief. Failure is the mother of success." Thea pretended to be affectionate and comforted him. Seeing that she did not directly pull Barry up, Reverse Lightning was relieved. At this time, his acting skills were on full display. He said with tears in his eyes, 17 people died, hundreds of people were injured. I am ashamed to face all the people who trusted me. The two of them showed off their acting skills on the spot. Sia combined her image of a capitalist who disregarded human life and a person who explored new heights in medicine. Reverse Lightning, on the other hand, showed pain, guilt, regret, and so on. Both of them immersed themselves in their true feelings and went through the process. After that, they went back to their respective homes. It would take at least 400 years for Reverse Lightning's mother to be born. Thea wouldn't be able to see her for a while, so she went home to look for her biological mother. Moira's mayoral term was less than 2 years away. As for the next step of her plan, whether it was herself or her staff, they all welcomed Moira's preparation to run for the White House. However, the process was extremely complicated. At least in the 4th year, or the year before the election, she would spend a whole year busy with the campaign. Modern candidates generally began preparations a year and a half in advance. This required the support of Moira's family members. In some occasions, family members had to be present to act as mascots. Thea was not worried about Moira. After all, this was her suggestion. Moira was worried about Oliver. Her son's way of thinking was very strange. To be honest, as his mother, she did not know what Oliver was thinking. As she expected, Thea didn't react when she heard that she wanted to go further. She just nodded and continued to eat her dinner. Oliver was a little stunned. His own mother was going to run for President of the United States? Would this affect him? Of course it would. At least the FBI and the CIA were responsible for protecting the president's family. If he was watched by agents every day, it would be inconvenient for him to move freely every night like now. However, Oliver was in no position to stop her. Besides, there were still 2 years left. What if she didn't get elected? Thinking of this, Oliver followed Thea's example and lowered his head to eat. Moira was satisfied. If her children didn't object, it meant that they supported her. After hesitating for a moment, Moira said, "Thea, you and Miss Prince won't make a big deal out of it, right?" Thea thought about it and understood what her mother meant. She was afraid of causing a big scandal. She waved her hand and said, "Don't worry. We have a very long life. For Diana, we are still very young." After getting a satisfactory answer, Moira looked at Oliver and asked, "What about you? You and that Chinese woman?" During dinner, they began to discuss Oliver's marriage. To be honest, Moira was not satisfied with Shadow, but she would not be happy if Oliver chose Laurel. In short, when a mother-in-law looked at her daughter-in-law, she would find something she did not like about her daughter-in-law. After dinner, the family sat in front of the TV and chatted. Thea was especially concerned about who would succeed the mayor of Star City in 2 years after Moira's death. Several mayors in the original space-time died in office one after another. 2 years later, Oliver changed and became the mayor. Now it was impossible. Mother and son inheritance? This was too shocking. The basic democratic system still needed to be taught. Sebastian Brad is a very ambitious young man. I have a hunch that he will win in the end. Moira put forward her idea to the future mayor of Star City. Sebastian Bullard? Thea thought for a moment. She had some impression of him. He was a person who was good at putting on a show. In the original timeline, he was the mayor candidate who stood out after Malcolm shook Star City. In fact, he was Death Knell's subordinate. Now, Malcolm and Madame Xanadu were very close. Death Knell was also expanding his territory in outer space. Neither of them had anything to do with Star City. Thea didn't care about it at all. She didn't care about it at all. However, she didn't care about others, but someone was thinking about her. 2 days later, on a sunny afternoon, Thea was interrupted by the low beeping of her mobile phone. "What's the matter, Gideon?" "Someone has triggered the confidential document codenamed M," the artificial intelligence reported emotionlessly. "Show it to me." Thea turned on the desktop monitor. "A minute ago, someone tried to retrieve information about Star City Hospital's Dr. Jill and your birth certificate from 22 years ago." Thea rubbed her forehead. "How did you deal with it?" "I intercepted it according to the preset plan, but the other party didn't give up. Inferring from the information in the other party's computer, the other party is digging deeper into this matter." After Gideon finished speaking, he displayed a large photo on the screen. The other party was a Caucasian man in his 30s. He was dressed very plainly and had a long face. He was not good-looking, but his eyes were very spirited. Thea looked at the name displayed at the bottom of the screen. "Sebastian Brad." She laughed. Such a rotten fish dared to investigate her background? He really didn't want to live anymore. This was the arrangement of fate. Thea thought for a moment. She took out the light ring and contacted Death Knell, who was far away in outer space. He was the most suitable person to do this. Chapter 504. Death Knell came quickly. He didn't ask why after he got the mission target. He went to catch the person alone. Half an hour later, Thea met the daring mayoral candidate, Mr. Sebastian Bullard, in her laboratory. She could tell that Death Knell's sudden attack had scared the man out of his wit. Although he tried to stand up, his legs were shaking like a sieve. He tried a few times but failed. "Mr. Sebastian, do you recognize me?" Thea was wearing a sleeveless black sundress. She sat on the chair with her hands crossed on her legs and asked curiously. Sebastian looked at Death Knell, who was as strong as a bear with 2 swords on his back and had a lot of blood on his body. He wanted to say that he didn't know her. But thanks to Thea's popularity and his previous investigation, as well as what he was doing half an hour ago, he didn't deserve to have a brain if he couldn't connect the dots. He smiled bitterly and tried to please her. "I know, Dr. Thea Quinn. I've seen your photo. You're prettier than the photo." Thea smiled back elegantly, but her words were as cold as ice. "You're investigating me? You're trying to find a way to attack my mother through me, aren't you? Is this your plan to smear your ex's reputation?" Sebastian weighed the pros and cons in his heart and finally nodded slightly. "Maybe in your heart I'm just a small figure, a symbol, a weapon you use to attack your political opponent. Am I right?" This time, Sebastian didn't dare to nod because he saw Death Knell draw his swords. The law couldn't save him, and neither could the voters. He could only save himself. "I was just curious. I didn't mean to belittle you." Sebastian waved his hands in an attempt to make his words more convincing. Unfortunately, Thea ignored his little gestures. You're trying to destroy my family. What mayor? What president? Ask my men. They'll tell you if I care about those things. Death Knell didn't have time to answer the prisoner's question. He was looking around. With Thea's anger, the ground of the lab shook slightly. There was something like static electricity in the air. The static electricity hit the paper and made a crackling sound. You're just a dirty politician. Calling you a politician is already a compliment to you. Even the FBI doesn't dare to investigate, but you actually have the guts to investigate. Looking at your computer records, you even contacted a few media outlets. Ha! Sia chuckled as she spoke. Who would have thought that such an arrogant person who had nothing to do with her life would almost do something that would have a profound impact on the world? With a flick of his finger, before Sebastian could understand what was going on, he found himself pressed to the ground by an invisible force. In his sight, he could only see Sia's high heels and chair. The mysterious and strange method made his heart beat violently. Today, he seemed to have found something amazing, but he didn't know if the other party would spare his life. Sia seemed to be talking to him, but also seemed to be talking to herself. If you reveal my identity to the public, my mother and brother will be questioned by countless people, and my family will be destroyed because of it. You must have thought about this, right? But you don't know what I'll do if I don't have a family to hold me back. It's something you can't even imagine in your dreams. Democracy? Dream of your democracy. The temperature in the room dropped visibly. Sebastian felt that the air he exhaled began to turn into mist. He wanted to shrink his body, but an invisible force stretched him, and he could only lie on the ground motionlessly. Do you know the god on earth of the unrighteous alliance? Thea laughed self-deprecatingly. You don't know. If I want to, I can paralyze the global military network. Nuclear bombing is not a plot in a novel. Superheroes have their own weaknesses. They can't stop me. Mankind will be on the fast track to destruction before it reaches glory, and it's all because of you. Mr. Sebastian Brad, do you know that a nameless nobody like you actually had the opportunity to decide the fate of all of humanity at that moment? Thea looked at his confused eyes. You don't know anything. Without the permission of the higher-ups, without secret support, you're just an infuriating wretch. Your existence is meaningless. You can disappear now. He thought that Thea was going to kill him. Although he didn't understand what she said before, he still understood that she was going to kill him. Unfortunately, no matter how hard he struggled, it was useless. Just when he was in despair, he suddenly found himself floating. Then he met Thea's green eyes. The other party's eyes flashed with colorful light, as if some great power had hit him. Something invisible was cutting the void. Sebastian didn't know how long it had been, but it felt like a year or a moment. He felt that he had regained his ability to move. The scary woman was rubbing her forehead, and the bear-like brawny man looked at him in confusion. Sebastian didn't think too much and ran away. Returning to the crowded street, he had an illusion that it was a lifetime ago. Why did she let him go? Was she going to play some cat-and-mouse game? He didn't know. He only knew that he had to run. After taking the taxi, he realized that he didn't have a single cent on him. His mobile phone, credit cards, and other things were all gone. He used his glib tongue to persuade the driver to take him to Star City, and he would pay the driver double the fare. However, when he arrived at Star City, Sebastian was dumbfounded. His campaign office had turned into a private house. He called his assistant, but the assistant said that he didn't know him. After noticing the strangeness of the situation, he went to the base of his dark forces. He was not a pure person. He had once gathered a few people from the underworld to form a small gang. Usually, they would do things that were inconvenient for him to show his face. The situation in the base was exactly the same as in the campaign office. The environment was still the same, but the people were no longer the same. Using the familiar terrain nearby, Sebastian got rid of the taxi driver and fled all the way back to his residence. Jumping in through the window, he found that this was no longer his home. The layout was different, the furnishings were different, and there were strangers hanging on the wall. Sebastian felt that he was going crazy. At first, he thought that Thea was very powerful and had a lot of people. She wanted to cut off all his escape routes and make him beg for death. But a series of failures gave him a horrible idea. Everything he had done before seemed to be illusory. The other party seemed to have erased the traces of his existence. Chapter 505. In order to verify his conjecture, he deliberately created a small conflict on the street. Sebastian was arrested and sent to the police station, but the police were surprised and he was terrified. There was no record of him in the police station. He provided some information and asked the police to help search for his parents. The result was the same. His parents were both there, but there was no record of him. At least, there was no record of him in the police station. It was rare to find an unrecorded person in modern society. Many police officers came to watch, but Sebastian found that many of the police officers he knew did not know him. He became more and more sad. He pretended to be crazy and was detained in the police station for 2 days, leaving behind a legend that he might be a time traveler. Finally, he was taken away by the Star City Mental Hospital. Such a small matter was treated as a topic of conversation in the Star City police station. It did not take long for Thea to hear about it. She just laughed it off. Who would have thought that this guy was going to run for mayor? No one remembered him. Sebastian did not exist in anyone's memory. Except for himself and Thea, no one knew about this person's past. All traces of his existence had been erased from the source by the power of rules. The price was that Sia had a headache and a week of dizziness. Just an ordinary person was enough to make her feel terrible. She couldn't use this move, which she named Eye of Obliteration, easily anymore, at least not at this stage. Star City regained its tranquility, and no one remembered Sebastian. Several outstanding people who were expected to succeed as the mayor of Star City had already begun to secretly exchange various interests. Star City's economy was prosperous, and public security was stable. They didn't need to do anything to get a good political achievement. No one could refuse this temptation. The prosperity and stability of Star City naturally bred crime. After the Brick Wall Gang was defeated, another criminal with the code name Count of Vertigo rose in Star City. He produced a large amount of hallucinogens and put them on the market. The crime rate in the city increased by several % in just a week. Felicity, who asked Thea out for coffee, just said a few words and stopped talking about Count of Vertigo. Now that the Green Arrow team was strong and powerful, a little Count of Vertigo was not worth mentioning. "How is Sarah now? You seem to be a lot more capable than I thought," Thea couldn't help but exclaim. That day, when she went to find Green Arrow, she was shocked. The shooting club had 2 more female members. Laurel's sister, Sarah Lance, had finally returned to Star City. Together with her was the Ninja Master's daughter, Nissa El Ghul. Talia's ruthless rule forced Nisha and Sarah to hide outside for 2 years. That's right, these 2 ladies had that kind of intimate relationship. Sarah, who missed her sister and her father, had nowhere to go. In the end, she brought Nisha back to Star City. Because of the participation of Thea and the future Sarah back then, Sarah did not meet Oliver on Purgatory Island in this time and space. The 2 of them met and fought for a long time before they realized that they were running friends. In a trance, the 2 of them seemed to have rekindled their old relationship. This angered the Ninja Master's youngest daughter, Nissa. "Don't you dare steal Sarah from me." How could the word messy be enough to describe the entanglement of their feelings? Compared to the tangled relationship between them, the Count of Vertigo was just a small problem. As an outsider, Thea felt that it was messy. As an insider, Oliver was even more messy. The siblings would occasionally chat a little. Everything had to be solved by themselves. That day, when the giant creature was purified, the magic content in the air increased. Coupled with the explosion of the particle accelerator in Midtown, the unknown substance in the air was increasing rapidly. Some abnormalities could be found all over the world. Thea could feel that the surface of the calm water was unusually restless. Something bad could happen at any time. In a peaceful afternoon, when Thea was preparing to go home after a busy day of work, a series of urgent phone calls interrupted her journey. "Come to Gotham quickly, Superman has gone crazy." The person who called her was Barbara Gordon. On the other side of the phone, it sounded like a demolition site. The rumbling sound was incessant. Thea did not have time to think. She put on the god's armor and rushed straight to Gotham without caring about shocking the world. As she flew at full speed, Gotham came into view in the blink of an eye. Half of the street had been destroyed. Ordinary citizens were running for their lives. The gangs on the street had started a frenzy of looting. In the air, there were also police and television planes. The former was maintaining order, while the latter was reporting the news without fear of death. However, the most eye-catching one was Superman, who flew in the air from time to time. He was wearing a blue tight suit and a red cape. His eyes were scarlet red. On the ground, fighting with him was Batman, who was wearing a set of heavy robot-like armor. The thick armor provided him with a strong defense. Various black technology equipment also provided the armor with decent attack power. However, the battle was rushed and he was not prepared at all. Even though Batman was wearing the armor that he named Anti-Superman, he was still beaten to a pulp. What was going on? A few days ago, she was worried that something would happen to Louise. Superman could not have turned evil so quickly, right? Seeing that Batman was about to fall, Thea did not have time to ask. She flew down and received Superman's fatal punch. The force sent her flying more than 10 meters. At the same time, Superman was also pushed back 2 meters. In terms of pure strength, there was still a gap between the two of them, but the gap was not big. What's going on? Can someone explain it to me? Thea took out her holy sword and faced Superman with a bright light. There's something controlling him in his chest. Batman's armor was severely damaged. The voice that came out was a little distorted. Thea then looked at Superman's chest. Because Clark's pectoral muscles had always been well developed, even many women could not compare, so she had not noticed it. At this time, with Batman's reminder, she saw a dark purple plant under Superman's clothes. For tentacle-like things were constantly absorbing his vitality. The main body of the plant was also emitting a kind of sound wave that was like a psychic shock. It affected Superman's brain through some kind of extremely strange resonance. Black Mercy? Thea had an impression of this thing. Whether it was in the plot of the Supergirl TV series, or in reality helping Poison Ivy collect strange plants, Thea had seen this thing before. Although she had seen it before, it was not easy to deal with it. This thing had no combat power at all, but in its long evolution, it had a very damn symbiotic defense system. If it was forcibly pulled by an external force, Superman's chances of survival were less than 1 in 10,000. How did the original Supergirl deal with it? Thea thought about it while dealing with Superman's attack. It was very difficult for this broken plant to perfectly control the Kryptonians. Their level of life was different. Just like ants could not control humans, it could not control Superman, at least not completely. This made Thea breathe a sigh of relief. This kind of purely external corruption was much easier to deal with than Superman's subjective corruption. If the normal and rational Superman's combat power was 1, then the Superman who had completely abandoned his moral standards was 5. The guy in front of her, who was controlling Superman like a puppet, could not even exert half of his combat power. The only pity was that this plant controlled Superman and was immune to many of the psychic control spells. Thea could only fight with the big sword. The situation was a bit of a stalemate for a while. Chapter 506. As the top holy sword of the Celtic gods, it wasn't difficult to injure Superman, especially when the other party's attacks were disorganized. Now that he was being controlled by the plant, it was impossible for Superman to attack. However, there was no kryptonite to degrade his cells. No matter how big of a wound Thea inflicted on him, Superman could immediately recover. With the energy in her body, coupled with the rapid growth of her cells and the assistance of the yellow sun, Thea circled Superman for a long time and found that the other party basically didn't lose any blood. Halfway through, Batman adjusted his armor and rejoined the battle. The black helmet and black armor looked extraordinary, but it was useless. Both of them were a little restrained when fighting in the city. They could only consciously lead Superman to the suburbs. Of course, the main credit was Batman. When the controlled Superman saw Batman, it was as if he saw the enemy who killed his father. He punched and kicked fiercely. If it wasn't for Batman's anti-Superman armor that was really thick, he might have died. When they reached the suburbs, Thea finally didn't have so many scruples. Her moves began to gradually become fierce. The sword attached with emotional energy cut a 20-centimeter-long blood groove on Superman's left arm. The wound took a full minute to heal. Under the chain reaction, one of the tentacles of Black Mercy was directly cut off by the holy sword. Can this thing be cut to death like this? Batman's armor also had a similar X-ray equipment. Through the clothes, he saw that one of the tentacles of the plant on Superman's chest had withered and weathered. He asked curiously. Thea avoided answering. This holy sword also consumed a lot of energy. Cutting through the body of steel was no joke. After that, she followed the spiritual channel and mapped the wound to the plant's body. This use of energy could be said to be extremely ingenious. It was okay to do it occasionally, but it was too tiring to keep cutting like this. It wasn't difficult to guess that there would be a bigger battle later on. When she was dealing with Supergirl in the original timeline, this plant was like a dead corpse, lying on the host's chest. At that time, she didn't see that it had the ability to control the host's body, and Thea didn't think that this plant had any deep hatred for Batman. Considering that Supergirl's Uncle Norn's belongings had all fallen into Luthor's hands, it was almost certain that this Black Mercy had been given to Superman by Luthor. It was likely that Doomsday had already entered the countdown. Hold on a little longer. The reinforcements I called are almost here. Thea dodged Superman's frost breath, and Batman, who was controlling the anti-Superman armor, sent out a lot of sound waves, directly repelling Superman. Is it Diana? The anti-Superman armor kicked Superman away. No. It was useless to call Diana. Thea called Poison Ivy. Presumably, with her special ability, she could control this plant. In fact, the Frost Killer's ability to absorb heat had a miraculous effect on Kryptonians. Unfortunately, Caitlin still couldn't see the light of day. One of Black Mercy's tentacles was cut off, and its control over Superman was further weakened. Thea's mind control spell could now cause some delay and deceleration effect. Your armor is not bad. When did you develop it? Thea asked during the break. Batman was beating Superman loudly, but he pretended not to hear and avoided answering her question. He only knew how to beat up Superman on the ground. The two of them treated Superman like a sandbag on the ground for another 3 minutes before Poison Ivy finally arrived. Leaving aside Batman, who wanted to investigate a stranger's 8 generations of ancestors, Poison Ivy's expertise was unquestionable. She summoned a cactus-like plant from the void. Amidst the whirring sound, Superman staggered and fell from the sky as if he was drunk. After that, he completely lost his mind. Poison Ivy's expression was a little solemn. Her fingers touched Black Mercy on his chest. After a long while she said, "Thea, this thing has been modified. It is not completely a plant now. It is very difficult for me to control it." Thea roughly checked it. It would take a lot of effort to completely remove it. Now that they were in the wilderness, it was not the place to chat. She could already see military satellites spying on Gotham. Let's go to your Batcave first. My friend, Poison Ivy, is a trustworthy friend. Thea first asked Batman, and then briefly introduced her. Batman wanted to refuse, but he also knew that he still needed Poison Ivy's expertise. After a slight hesitation, he agreed. The armored Batman carried Superman on his back, and the three of them returned to the Batcave. The first thing they saw was a big hole in the wall. If they were not mistaken, this was the evidence of Superman's crime. Next, Thea saw Louise Lane, who had the ability to appear wherever danger was. The death-courting expert was helping to clear the rubble on the ground. According to Batman, Louise was learning basic fighting techniques from Barbara at the time. The golden armor that everyone bought, collectively made for her fitted her quite well. At this time, Louise and Barbara were lifting a cement pillar. Seeing them carry Superman in, Louise was shocked. How is Superman? He is fine. Thea was exhausted, and Batman beside her was bruised and swollen. Compared to his clothes that were a little damaged, Superman was indeed fine. After placing Superman on the platform, the few idlers in the Batcave gathered around. Batgirl Barbara, Huntress Helena, Nightwing Dick Grantham and his current girlfriend Princess Starfire, and finally the third-generation Red Robin, Tim Drake, whom Thea met for the first time. While Poison Ivy was checking, Batman briefly introduced everyone to Thea. Whether she knew them or not, at least they could be familiar with each other. Then, he talked about the surprise attack. In fact, there was not much to say. Superman's movements were too fast. There was very little time between when he was discovered by the sky base of the Watchtower and when he landed in the Batcave. If it weren't for the fact that Princess Starfire and Louise, who was wearing armor, had blocked the first two attacks, these ordinary superheroes, except for Batman, who had unparalleled evasion attributes, wouldn't be standing there in one piece. After that, Batman urgently activated the anti-Superman armor. However, there was no major conflict between this time and space, and Batman's armor was still some distance away from completion. It was not surprising that he was defeated in a hasty battle. I forcefully disconnected the mechanical part. I can only make this plant sleep. If you want to wake him up, he will have to rely on himself, Poison Ivy said helplessly after checking for a long time. What do you think? Batman asked Thea. After all, she was a medical giant. Collect his brainwaves, create a brainwave synchronizer, enter his space of consciousness, and wake him up. Thea told him the idea she had long thought of. Batman did not have a better idea. The two of them worked together, and in less than 10 minutes, a slightly crude but high-tech helmet appeared in front of everyone. Who would enter the space of consciousness to wake Superman up? A very serious problem was placed in front of them. Chapter 507. No matter what the enemy's plan is, I only know that he deliberately diverted Superman away. The Metropolis is in a critical situation now. I don't have much time, I have to go back immediately. Thea pointed to a few monitors in the Batcave. On the screen, the Metropolis had begun to lose power. Countless amounts of electricity had been diverted to a certain place. Thea felt that it might be Lex Luthor's underground base. Her reason was perfect. Even if Superman woke up now, he would let Thea go back to take care of the city first. Except for Poison Ivy, everyone present was a superhero. They could completely understand this choice. Let me do it, we are. Louise volunteered, but she was not sure if she should mention her relationship with Superman. Thea decided immediately. It's you. As for letting Batman wake up Superman, the scene was a little scary. Entering Superman's space of consciousness would definitely reveal a lot of secrets. Unless the Earth was on the verge of destruction, Batman would never open his mind and let others read his thoughts. Leaving Poison Ivy to help, Thea bade farewell and flew back to the Metropolis alone. With Superman's appearance, it was impossible to count on him to deal with Doomsday. As for Batman? How cruel it was to let an ordinary person like him be a bystander. Thea contacted Diana and Supergirl on the way. With the strength of the three girls, they could even kill the Apocalypse Star, let alone a well-prepared Doomsday. In such a place where thousands of people were watching, she used her real identity to fight bravely, win the trust of all humans, and gain willpower. This was the main reason why she ignored Luthor's little tricks for so long. After entering the Metropolis airspace, she found that there was still some time. She hid the god's armor and put away the holy sword. Her eyes were constantly looking for abnormalities. At this time, it was close to evening. The large shortage of electricity made the city dark. From time to time, pedestrians on the streets and alleys called the police for help. Some sensitive citizens felt the calm before the storm and hid in their homes with guns in their hand. Not long after, Thea found traces of a battle at the edge of the city. Both sides of the battle were almost completely wiped out. One side was an active soldier in military uniform, while the other side was a lone, weak woman, Luthor's secretary, Miss Maisie. This secretary was really fierce. She was no different from an ordinary person without any enhancements. She had taken out 19 fully armed American soldiers by herself. The main reason she was injured was because the shrapnel from a grenade had cut her abdomen. She had lost a lot of blood, and her speed was getting slower and slower. When Thea arrived, she found that she had been shot at least 6 times, but she was still breathing. Is it worth sacrificing so much for Luthor? Thea was very puzzled. With Mercy's qualifications, she had the looks and the ability. As a modern person, Thea actually saw the spirit of an ancient death warrior in her. This made Thea a little moved. Unfortunately, the secretary was on her deathbed, so it was impossible for her to answer her question. Thea sighed. If it were an uncle or an aunt lying in a pool of blood, she would have walked over directly. However, the secretary was really beautiful and had a good figure. It was a pity that she died here. Looking into the depths, Thea felt that there was still some time before the birth of Doomsday. She helped the secretary back to her laboratory first. She put her into the top black technology medical cabin that had previously treated the Frost Killer. The cabin door was closed, and she performed CPR and a large amount of blood transfusion. After that, she began to remove the shrapnel and suture the wound. However, Miss Maisie was still seriously injured. She was just an ordinary person, and it was already a sign of her tenacity to be able to hold on until she could treat her. Thea was not in a hurry to wake her up. She set the dormant program and sank her into the ground with the medical cabin. The battle with Doomsday would cause another catastrophe in Metropolis. Her laboratory was not safe. If the laboratory was exposed to the public because of the upcoming battle, some dangerous experimental data and experimental samples would flow into the hands of ordinary people. It would be very troublesome. A large amount of data was backed up. Some dangerous samples, such as Mungo's cells, Doomsday's cells, and Kryptonian cells, were all sunk deep underground. Until there were no more mistakes, she rushed to the previous area and continued to search for Luthor's traces. Along the way, the corpses of the military soldiers and mercenaries served as road signs for her. Thea walked into the depths of the underground base. She was very fast. Many people only saw a blur in front of their eyes before she disappeared. Looking at the experimental equipment and documents scattered everywhere along the way, Thea could not help but sigh. Luthor had really spent a lot of money to dig out such a large underground project, coupled with the dazzling array of rare materials and equipment here. And with such a big movement, it would be a big joke if the military and government did not know about it. Looking at how the military had arrived at the scene one step ahead of her, she knew that they had a tacit understanding. Today, whether they were here to reap the benefits or to stop Luthor's evil deeds, the key was to see who would be the final winner. After breaking through the largest battlefield at high speed and entering the deepest part of the base, Thea finally found the target of her trip, Mr. Luther, who had recently lost a lot of hair. Standing in front of him was also an old acquaintance of Thea's, the old General Ryan, who also had the ability to appear wherever there was danger. Of course, these high-ranking people were not here alone. Standing beside Luther was a burly man nearly 2 meters tall. Under Thea's supervision, this man's whole body was made of metal, and there was a large piece of kryptonite placed on his chest where his heart was. This was one of Superman's nemeses, the Metal Man. Next to General Ryan stood a tall robot with a red body, a big T symbol on his chest, and a blue cape. This was the superhero, Red Whirlwind. Thea just glanced at him casually. The black technology of the military was still very commendable. This guy's bionic skin was not bad, but it was hard to tell whether he was an artificial intelligence or not. However, the other party seemed to feel Thea's gaze and turned to look at her with a stern expression. "Yo, both of you are here. There's a power outage in our house. May I ask what caused it?" The young lady did not intend to hide her whereabouts. She stood up calmly and asked a completely unrelated question. Dr. Quinn came quickly. "Is Superman okay?" General Ryan did not appreciate her humor, but Luther did not take it seriously. He greeted her briskly and asked about Superman's recent situation like a friend. Thea glanced at the old man next to her. She did not dare to say that his daughter was now awakening the sleeping Prince Charming in Superman's dream. Oh, what a sincere feeling! Luther seemed to have analyzed something from her subtle expression. He nodded gently and said something that General Ryan didn't understand, but Dr. Quinn's behavior today is very strange. You're standing here as if nothing has happened. Don't you plan to continue hiding behind the scenes? Like your female companion, you were also left behind by the ancient gods to protect the earth, right? Luther's tone was still brisk, with a bit of banter and seriousness. Chapter 508. Horus, Apollo, Jehovah, these gods are real? Who else is included? Diana Prince? What role does Professor Quinn play in this? Luther looked at Thea with curiosity. Thea didn't need to lie about this topic. Besides, other than Jehovah, who Luther mentioned, she knew all the other gods. Now that she was on good terms with Hera, Thea didn't hesitate to use the excuse. Just because you can't see them doesn't mean they don't exist. Gods do exist, and they have been silently protecting this world. Thea saw that Luther was about to speak, so she interrupted him. I know what you want to say. Let me tell you, they are not perfect. They have their own ideas and their own positions. Gods are not omnipotent, so they can't be perfect. I'm not a god, I'm just an ordinary person. Ryan looked at her. You're still on our side, aren't you? Thea nodded. She was on the same side as the military when it came to stopping Luther. It was a bit narrow-minded to say that she was on the military's side. She should be on the side of order. General, I'm on the same side as you now, but I've warned you many times that Brainiac's threat still exists. Don't develop artificial intelligence. You're risking the lives of 7 billion people on Earth. Don't tell me that the one beside you is just a robot. Ryan didn't say anything. Instead, the robot beside him said, I'm Red Whirlwind. My core command is to protect humanity. Professor Quinn, we're not enemies. Thea didn't comment. You'll get into big trouble, but I'll still help you today. Young Mistress did not mention anything about her own artificial intelligence. She pushed this idea to the extreme. First, she stood at the top of the human race and used righteousness to make the military suffer. Any problems that happened in the future would be their fault. Ryan's idea was to ignore it. He didn't care about the future. He had to get through today first. The few people who were secretly monitoring Luther reported that the man's energy reaction was far beyond their calculations. After several failed negotiations, the military was forced to take the risk and bring the latest robot to capture him. Unfortunately, they were still one step too late. The incubation pool in front of them was different from the swimming pool in the movies. It was as big as a football field. The water in the pool was undulating under the dim light. A translucent fetal membrane was slowly floating up, and two arms could be vaguely seen struggling inside. Haha, I don't care if you are a god or not. I only know that the time for humans to get rid of the old era and get rid of you useless gods has finally come. This is Karl Ayre's doomsday and yours as well. Luther's mental state was a little messed up. He opened his hands as if he was announcing the results of a trial. Stop him. General Ryan only felt that the danger warning in his heart was incomparably clear. He hurriedly gave the order to Red Tornado. Thea snorted. What were you guys doing earlier? Why are you in such a hurry now? It was too late. However, she still cancelled her transformation and revealed a silver-white armor. She held a long sword and pretended to charge forward. Red Tornado had the ability to control the wind. It was extremely fast. When Thea deliberately went easy on it, it charged directly at Luther, trying to capture the leader first. The Metal Man, who had a metal skeleton and a kryptonite heart, blocked the red whirlwind. The two inhuman creatures attacked each other at high speed. The red whirlwind was much faster than the Metal Man, but the Metal Man's strong defense also caused him to be slightly injured. Thea directly knocked Luther down and threw him to Old Man Ryan. She looked not far away with a serious expression. Doomsday had finally arrived. Ancient deformed creatures of Krypton. Look, this is the harbinger of the coming darkness. Luther was knocked to the ground by General Ryan in a few moves. He didn't feel anything as he roared like a madman. Run, take your people and run. Sia turned around and shouted, then ignored them. She held her sword with both hands and was ready for battle. At this time, Doomsday gave her the feeling that he was more powerful than Horus when he descended in his true form. Although they were in different realms and had different names, in a sense, Doomsday could be considered a true god, and a true god in his prime. Thea did not hesitate. She was not stupid enough to wait for Doomsday to fully emerge before fighting. She gathered all the magic in her body. The divine puppet armor converted a large amount of lightning magic. Thea attached all the magic to her holy sword. She jumped high and slashed at Doomsday. A large amount of lightning hit Doomsday's membrane. Doomsday also realized the urgency of the situation and frantically tore at the membrane. Finally, at the moment when the lightning hit his body, he stretched out two giant claws and forcibly blocked the holy sword. The power of life and hope collided with the power of death and destruction. The first collision of the two almost opposite forces ended with Thea's victory. One of Doomsday's left hands was cut off at the wrist. His body, which was already half standing, was pushed back into the pool by the strong impact. In order to pretend that she did not know, Thea could not immediately take out her Krypton weapon. It would be too fake to end the battle in 3 seconds. In order to receive more praise and power after the battle, she had to fight a few rounds with this big guy. She even had to let it level up a few times. She did not care about how disgusting the sticky liquid in the pool was. She directly jumped into it and slashed at Doomsday's head. Clang! In less than 30 seconds, Doomsday had completed a level up. His left hand grew back, and his strength and speed increased greatly at the same time. He swung his hand and sent Thea flying. Chapter 509. Damn it, what happened to obeying orders and listening to commands? Lane was extremely dissatisfied with the artificial intelligence that the military had invented. He agreed with Thea's repeated warnings about not developing artificial intelligence. However, he had no time to think about it. He could only run outside with Luther. As Louise's father, he was more or less related to Superman, the son of the dimension. He was quite lucky. He saw a group of soldiers after running for a while. A few soldiers realized that he was a high-ranking military official. They hesitated for a while but still brought him along to escape. General Lane was running for his life. With the help of Red Whirlwind, Thea was no longer in a hurry. However, this robot was still far from their level. It could only hold Doomsday back. It would take at least 100 of them to defeat him. What's the situation over there? Only the Martian hunter could communicate telepathically. Thea and Doomsday had left the underground base long ago. Her blonde hair was covered in dust. It's bad. Why, do you want to help? The Martian hunter hesitated for a while but decided to tell the truth. Your side is on fire. I can't help. Where's Superman? In the Batcave. You can ask Batman for the details. I'm too busy here. Thea only relaxed a little. Red Whirlwind was severely injured by Doomsday's heat ray. 2 large holes appeared on the left side of its chest. Its bionic organs were destroyed. Its body could no longer maintain its high-speed rotation. It fell to the ground like a rag. Fortunately, it was a robot. It was the last on Doomsday's list to be destroyed. Seeing Thea charging at him again, Doomsday, who was a little slow, instinctively let Red Whirlwind go. The huge disadvantage in terms of size made Thea feel very aggrieved. She no longer cared about the consumption of emotional energy, and a 10-meter-tall manifestation that looked exactly like her was created by her. The 10-meter-tall giant also held an enlarged holy sword. Under Doomsday's surprised gaze, it quickly moved left and right. It found an opening and slashed Doomsday's abdomen horizontally. A large amount of dark blood-like liquid flowed out. Doomsday cried out in pain. Thea's experiment was not in vain. Its cells could not simulate the holy sword at all. This kind of fantasy weapon was its real enemy. It jumped wildly, lifted a tall building beside it, and threw it at Thea. Nowadays, whether it was the satellites in space, the drones not far away, or the helicopters, there were many people watching the live broadcast. If it were any other time, she would have avoided them directly, but now she had to act righteous. He set up a thick defense in front of his body. On the other side, he used emotional energy to envelop the tall building to create an emergency ladder so that the people inside could quickly come out. Fortunately, at the critical moment, her reinforcements finally arrived. With a huge sonic boom, Kara Danvers rushed behind Doomsday. With the help of the huge acceleration, she punched Doomsday in the head. Supergirl, who had trained many times, calculated her position very well. Doomsday was hit towards the side where there were fewer people. However, it was impossible for him to come out unscathed. It was a miracle that such a 10-meter-tall monster with a weight of tons was sent flying with 0 casualties. Thea put down the lucky people she had saved. She was afraid that Supergirl would think too much and affect her combat ability, so she quickly chased after her. Why did you call Kara too? She's still a child. Where's Diana? The Martian hunter, who was full of fatherly love, immediately expressed his dissatisfaction. Thea did not spoil him. Diana is on her way. Besides, I'm only 2 years older than her. Thank you, I'm a child too. Either you come and help, or you go and help Superman. After being hit by Supergirl's attack, Doomsday began to evolve again. His body was surrounded by a large amount of electric arc. Some orange energy could be vaguely seen in his body. The bone armor on his skin began to expand rapidly, and a few large bone spikes emerged from his body. The most shocking thing was that Doomsday had a bone spur on each side of his fist. Just by looking at its sharpness and hardness, one could tell that it could not be blocked directly. When Doomsday saw Supergirl, it was as if some program had been activated. He fought with the 2 girls, and most of his killing moves were used on Supergirl. This made the little girl a little tired. Son of a bitch, how dare you ignore me? Thea jumped out of the battle circle. Her hands kept drawing complicated patterns in the air, and she began to chant an awkward spell. After that, she took out the God of Death's staff. After a full 15 seconds, she released the spell. A gray-white ray directly hit Doomsday. Aging spell. Everything had a limit. Thea's research showed that Doomsday's cells also had a limit, but it was a mixture of wills. It was not clear at a glance like an ordinary person. Ordinary people, whether young, middle-aged or old, could be easily distinguished. An ordinary person could be seen as a whole. However, Doomsday was an aggregate. His will was a mixture of wills. Some of the cells in his body were in a state of life, while others were in a state of death due to energy exhaustion. These dead cells were then swallowed to give birth to new cells, so it created the illusion that Doomsday had an endless supply of energy. Thea's method was to attack Doomsday from the source. She cut off the growth rate of all the cells. Cells that could divide 100 times were completely dead under the effect of aging spell. Her spell was directly effective. Doomsday began to roar. Unfortunately, Supergirl's attacks were still sharp. The speed of his cell loss began to increase. A large amount of dead skin and rotten flesh were abandoned by the main body. His original height of 10 meters shrank to 8 meters before he could stabilize himself. He wanted to enter another round of evolution. Unfortunately, the foundation of his cells was exhausted. He tried several times, but it ended in failure. This guy has become weak. Supergirl did not know how many experiments Thea had done for this aging spell. She also understood the principle of beating a drowning dog. She raised her slender fist and hit Doomsday's bald head. Thea also controlled the manifestation and began to chase after Doomsday. According to her calculations, the aging period was not long. As a biological weapon of Krypton, although she had not seen spells before, many principles were similar. The information engraved in Doomsday's genes would help him find a new way out. As expected, Doomsday began to shrink in size while the two of them were beating each other up. Doomsday retracted the bone spikes that were originally exposed on its body. A large number of new cells entered the circulation of his body. His vitality was rejuvenating in a way that one after the other. Doomsday was like a precise machine. He kept extracting the energy contained in each cell. After that, he swallowed and reorganized to give birth to new cells. In less than a minute, he had stopped his decline. His body recovered slightly and he made corresponding adjustments. Chapter 510. In order to prevent Thea's next aging spell, Doomsday evolved a thick layer of cuticle on the surface of his skin. Countless dead cells were recycled and piled up on the surface of his body layer by layer. A primitive version of the magic barrier was created and wrapped around him like a thick armor. Thea cast 2 more aging spells, but the effect was worse than the previous one. This was something that was not seen in the laboratory. In the laboratory, she could only study individual cells. She did not expect Doomsday to use such a stupid method to resist her magic. However, regardless of whether it was stupid or not, Doomsday did resist her magic. To some extent, it was quite efficient. Doomsday deserved the title of the strongest Krypton biochemical weapon. Fortunately, Thea had more than one backup plan. Her reinforcements were still arriving. Diana, who was wearing the champion's armor and a red cape with golden edges, and holding a sword and shield, finally arrived after Doomsday evolved again. After being beaten up by Thea for half a day, Doomsday's attack and defense now had some moves. At least he would not stupidly use his arm to block the holy sword. Facing Diana, who was also skilled in her moves, Doomsday did not take it head-on. He grabbed Thea's cape and threw her away. At the same time, he lowered his head to dodge Thea's holy sword. He reached out to grab the truck on the ground and sent Diana flying horizontally. The 3 girls usually fought against each other, but this was the first time they fought together against an enemy. Slowly, they began to cooperate. The 3 of them surrounded Doomsday and attacked him fiercely. Among the 3 girls, Supergirl was still the strongest, especially after she absorbed 30% of Apollo's energy. Now, in terms of pure strength, she was not inferior to Superman, who had been under the sun for 30 years. Diana's attack and defense were equal. Her attack and defense were both excellent. She was a natural warrior. Thea's attack was a little weaker. The Sword of Victory and Oath was a fantasy weapon, not a weapon that specialized in killing people. In addition, she did not have a very aggressive personality, so she seemed a little weak. However, this was all relative. From the combined strength of the three, Diana was still slightly stronger, Thea was slightly weaker, and Supergirl was at the bottom. Realizing that he was outnumbered, Doomsday circulated the energy in his body at full force. The heat rays from the Kryptonian genes surged wildly. 2 crimson rays shot straight at Supergirl's face. Not to be outdone, Supergirl also retaliated with heat rays. Thea felt that the timing was not bad. She also joined the game of killing whoever she glared at. Dark green energy shot towards Doomsday together with Supergirl. Doomsday had the upper hand against a Supergirl, but with Thea's addition, he immediately shrank back. It was still the same statement. Its strength was very strong, stronger than any of the three of them, but it was not to the extent where it could crush them. Diana naturally would not let go of such a good opportunity. She quickly moved behind Doomsday. The Valkyrie shouted loudly, and the Guardian bracelet combined with her own strength was activated dozens of times. The silver-white energy hit Doomsday's back directly. Even with the Kryptonian genes as a cushion, he could not withstand such a powerful blow. The moment he was sent flying, Thea and Supergirl's laser attacks hit him at the same time. The three women's strength coordinated very well. Originally, Thea and Supergirl's laser attacks and Diana's attacks were directed at the same direction. However, when Thea saw that Diana's attack was effective, her laser with tracking function wrapped around Supergirl's attack and went half a circle around Doomsday's chest directly. Doomsday, who had regained his 10-meter height, was directly sent out of the atmosphere by the three women's joint attack. If nothing went wrong, he would evolve again. Before she could catch her breath, Thea dialed the president's number. When the call went through, she did not bother to talk nonsense. "Where are your nuclear bombs? Now is a good opportunity. Hurry up and launch them." There was a lot of discussion on the other side of the phone. Thea continued to urge, "Hurry up now. He will recover soon." In fact, Thea knew that nuclear bombs were useless against Doomsday. They could even trigger a new round of evolution. However, if she did not let the people of Earth experience it, they would not know how to write the word "give up." At the same time, she wanted them to throw the nuclear bombs out so that they would not backstab them later. As long as they realized that nuclear bombs were useless, they would place their hopes on her and the others. Just as she expected, in less than a minute, a flaming missile carrying a nuclear warhead was launched into the sky. Afraid that it was not safe, another one was launched 10 seconds later. Did it succeed? This thought appeared in the minds of many high-ranking officials. If Thea knew what they were thinking, she would definitely despise them. This was not the end of it. It was just a halftime break. In the movies, Doomsday was almost instantaneous in order to make the camera feel more compact. In reality, it was impossible to achieve such an exaggerated level. Basic biological cell evolution required time. Doomsday was a technological product, not a magical product. Thea contacted the Martian hunter who had been on the telepathic channel. "How is Superman? This big monster seems to be not dead yet." The Martian hunter's voice was a little weak. He woke up. He imagined a Krypton environment. "We spent a lot of effort to wake him up. I will pull him in. You can ask him yourself." Not long after, the voice of Superman, who was even weaker, came. "I saw your battle. Hang in there, I will be there soon." Thea stretched her neck and looked for a long time, but she did not see Superman, who was coming soon. "Don't look, he is on my Batplane. Can't your yellow ring restore him? Why don't you fly towards me?" Batman's voice came at the right time. If it were not for the fact that he did not have any special abilities, Thea would have suspected that he also had supervision. The three girls agreed to go together. The three of them had good eyesight. Doomsday did not die after the nuclear explosion, but he was too severely injured. The cell repair in his body was a little slow, but the interval was very short. They were afraid that they would have to fight a stronger version of Doomsday in a few minutes. On the way, Thea received a call from the president. Ordinary people did not have supervision, but they had many observation satellites. Doomsday's body did not explode into powder. Instead, his cells began to repair the damage. He was rejuvenating. Anyone with a little common sense could analyze that he was not dead at all. What should we do? Thea smiled bitterly. Mr. President, continue to launch. Help us buy time. Previously, Luthor seriously injured Superman. We need time to heal Superman. I don't know if there is a tomorrow for mankind. Let's work together to get through this. Thea's words were very emotional, but a pessimistic atmosphere shrouded the White House through the phone. The president almost smashed the phone. He pointed at the noses of the high-ranking military officials and scolded, "Is this what you mean by everything is under control? Did Luthor say anything? He created this thing. Does it have any weaknesses? Can you take pity on me and tell me?" Chapter 5:11. The generals were also staring at each other. One of the oldest replied, "I'm sorry, Mr. President. We have used many methods, including deep hypnosis. From the analysis of the current clues, I'm afraid Luthor has created an invincible monster. Now that the situation is serious, I'm afraid we need your help." The president's finger trembled as he pointed at him. He was so angry that he could not speak. These people were such bastards. Usually, they would hide their true intentions and cause trouble. Now that they realized that the situation was too big to handle, they dragged him out to take the blame. God had mercy on him. Usually, he would have left work at this time. Now that the sky was dark, he still had to sit here and argue with these useless people. You have seen the effect of the nuclear bomb. Now, what other ideas do you have? Tell me and I'll carry them out. The president had no binding power over this group of people, nor did he have any punishment measures. He could only vent his dissatisfaction with his mouth. After that, he would have to clean up this mess himself. He suppressed the thought of using his submachine gun to attack these generals and turned to ask the think tank. At this time, everyone was speechless. What could they do against such a terrifying monster? They all lowered their heads and did not make a sound. We have been reduced to the point where we have to rely on 3 women to save our lives. Gentlemen, where are our male superheroes? The president pointed at the TV screen angrily. Where is Superman? What other Batman is there? Where are these people? Commander Amanda. The president turned to ask Amanda and found that she did not look good. He immediately realized that there was something wrong with his word. "I'm sorry, I'm not discriminating against men and women. I don't know what I should say." Thankfully, Amanda was very patriotic and automatically ignored the issue of discrimination between men and women. Like a robot, she reported, Superman was heavily injured by Luthor earlier. As for Batman, he's just an ordinary person. He can only provide limited help in a battle of this level. Luthor again. The president wanted to eat him. He slammed the table and shouted, "Bring Luthor here!" Seeing that the president was about to explode, the whole White House echoed with his voice, "Bring him here! Bring him here!" No one dared to provoke him. In less than 3 minutes, Luthor was brought to the White House. Mr. Luthor did not have the consciousness of a prisoner at all. He even expressed his views on the layout of the White House from an architectural perspective. The president was so angry that he wanted to shoot him. Weakness? Luthor looked at the president as if he was looking at a mentally retarded child. He pointed at the images of Thea and the others on the television. These people all have weaknesses. Their families and their relationships are all weaknesses. As for the doomsday that I created, it is perfect. There are no emotions, no good and evil. Naturally, there are no weaknesses. Unfortunately, most of the politicians in the room were involved in law, sociology, and other subjects. They did not understand Luther's theological and critical views at all. The only thing he understood was that Thea and the others had a weakness, but the monster that wanted to destroy Earth had no weakness. The news was terrible. The president had no choice but to call Sia again. Sia poured another round of bitter water for him. Her acting skills were superb. She described how Day of Destruction became more and more courageous as it fought and how it could not be killed. In short, the enemy was too powerful. They had better pray quickly. Luther, who did not know how to spell the word death, was overjoyed when he heard her praise Day of Devastation as if his own child had been praised. This deepened the shadow in everyone's hearts. They really prayed according to Thea's instructions. They prayed that the earth would spin faster. If Day of Devastation jumped down again, it would be best if it landed in another country. At this time, Thea did not know about their wishful thinking. She, Diana, and Supergirl met the Batfighter directly. They saw the dispirited Superman and took out the light ring to help him replenish his energy. Supergirl also took out the artifact that Hera gave her and injected pure solar energy into Superman's body. With the efforts of the two and Superman's self-healing, he finally recovered some energy and flew out of the Batfighter. This made Thea feel a little relieved. After all, a Superman in a Batfighter to participate in the battle was too scary. In order to take care of Batman, they landed on the ground and began to discuss. It seems like the enemy is still alive? Superman finally had the time to look up at the sky. In the original timeline, he had only been hit by one nuclear bomb. Now, he had been hit by more than 10 bombs consecutively. With Day of Devastation's cell reproduction speed, it took him a lot of time to repair his body. Yes, the enemy is getting stronger and stronger. At first, I was able to fight it to a draw. Now, the three of us have to work together to barely suppress it. The enemy's cell reproduction speed is very fast. Its cells. Thea made a long story short. She briefly told the two of them about some of the information she had analyzed through the battle. Halfway through, they had another call with the White House. Luther told them everything he knew and explained the process of his experiment. To him, showing off his talent was the most important thing. Kryptonite. Batman and Superman realized Day of Devastation's weakness at the same time through Luther's explanation. At the critical moment of their discussion, they saw something that looked like a meteor crashing towards the ground. Everyone's prayers were completely in vain. The enemy's target was still Metropolis. Day of Devastation is back. You guys go get the kryptonite. We'll stop it. Thea finished speaking and went up with the two girls. Superman wanted to help, but his body was too exhausted. Currently, he had only regained his mobility. He said to Batman, "You go get the kryptonite. I'm going to the star to recover my strength." After that, he flew towards the sun. On Thea's side, the three of them faced Day of Devastation again. It was unknown how many times this guy had leveled up. Day of Devastation had been hit by nuclear bombs several times. Now, its energy level had exceeded the strongest point in the original timeline. It was showing signs of losing control of its energy. Huge orange electric arcs kept appearing around its body. Sia's materialized chains were broken, and the heat ray forced Diana to retreat. Doomsday also sent Supergirl flying during the exchange of attack. Day of Devastation's energy level had surpassed the three of them. It was starting to crush them. The three of them went from suppressing Day of Devastation to restraining him. Day of Devastation, who was getting crazier and crazier, began to destroy the city. The military was not doing nothing. Dozens of fighter jets launched fierce attack. Unfortunately, if it was in the early stages, their missiles might have had some effect. However, against Day of Devastation, who had leveled up many times, they could not do any damage. The fighter jets were destroyed like toys by day of devastation. The only good news was that they moved the battlefield to the outskirts. It was not like in the movies where they did not cause too much damage to the city. Diana used the power of the silver bracelet to block the heat rays with both hands. She bought some time for Thea. Holding the sword of victory and oath, Thea did not prepare to use her kryptonite weapon. She was going to use the full power of the holy sword to test Day of Devastation's defense. Chapter 5:12. The holy sword was infused with her magic, and the bright light of the sword shot into the sky. The light of the night was scattered by the light of the sword, and it was as if there was a bright moon in the night sky. Many scenes appeared in the minds of those who saw or did not see this scene. There were beautiful memories, and naturally there were painful past. Anger, greed, fear, courage, hope, pity, love, and countless other emotions were finally gathered into a beam of light. Thea felt that the holy sword in her hand was tens of thousands of pounds, and she was about to reach her limit. She knew that the holy sword could hold more, but she could not hold on until then. She gave Diana a look, and the two of them cooperated very well. Thea stepped on Diana's knees and flew onto the shield. The Valkyrie roared, and the power of the silver bracelet was fully activated. Thea used the shield and her own strength to fly directly towards Doomsday. Go to hell, monster! In fact, it did not matter what she shouted, but she had to shout. Thea also pretended to be a hot-blooded anime protagonist. She held the sword with both hands, and the tip of the sword flashed with an obscure light. The holy shield kept increasing her speed, and Thea felt that she was in a better state than ever. She was confident that this sword would definitely hit its target, and it would definitely cause irreparable damage to Doomsday. Doomsday, who was made up of countless consciousness, seemed to have a premonition that a disaster was coming. However, it was not a unified entity, and its success and failure were chaotic. At this critical moment, its chaotic and crazy nature took over, and this irrational action directly pushed it into the abyss. Doomsday roared loudly, and chose to take the sword head-on. Its right fist had undergone a small evolution. Originally, there was only one thick bone spur. Now, it was covered by all kinds of ferocious bones. Its entire arm had a gray color, and orange energy was crazily flowing into its arm. The distance between them was getting closer and closer, and Thea began the final acceleration. The manifestation of emotions provided her with new motivation, and her speed increased by 10%. Her sudden acceleration caught Doomsday off guard. It did not have time to think, and could only swing its fist slightly passively. This punch did not fully utilize its strength, but Thea did not intend to give it a fair chance to fight. Thea knew that she had won the moment the light from the tip of her sword collided with Doomsday's bone armor. Thea's indestructible bone armor disappeared under the illusion of all living beings. The enormous energy of Doomsday only slowed down Thea's movements for a moment before it was swept away by her enormous light energy. Boom! The collision of the two caused a powerful explosion, and a huge sonic boom resounded through the night sky. The shockwave swept up countless debris in all directions. Supergirl relied on her own body to withstand the impact, while Diana flew to Thea's side to help her block the aftershock. Bah! Thea's face was covered in dust. Fortunately, this set of armor made by Zeus had a dust removal spell. Otherwise, her image would be ruined. Diana's armor had a similar effect, but Supergirl did not. She looked like a refugee from a certain country, but the little girl was in good spirits. Her eyes were constantly looking for traces of the enemy in the smoke. Thea did not have such good physical strength. This attack had almost exhausted all of her magic and emotional energy. The light ring could be recharged, but it would take at least a few days for her magic to fully recover. She stood up with the help of the holy sword. She had a hunch that Doomsday would be in a worse state if she was already in such a state. Supergirl cheeks puffed up and used her frost breath to disperse the smoke. Not only them, but the few people in the White House, and even the observant people who controlled the satellites to monitor the area, all saw Doomsday's miserable state. His right fist and his entire arm had completely disappeared. The huge energy impact had blown up a small part of the right side of his body. Losing his balance, he tried several times before he could stand up. The power of the Holy Sword was beyond the limit of cell simulation. Perhaps the Kryptonian scientists back then could not imagine the concept of a fantasy weapon. Doomsday, who fully embodied the essence of science and technology, was severely injured by this attack. The most serious thing was that no matter how hard he tried, the cells could not find a way out. The cells kept trying to grow in the direction of the damaged limb, but they all failed. It was as if he was originally a one-armed creature. "Let me end it." Diana handed the powerless Sia over to Supergirl to take care of and threw away her sword and shield. She made a great decision and decided to reveal her trump card. She finally unlocked the Guardian bracelet. This defensive artifact that she had worn on her arm since she was born finally fell to the ground with a bang. Her white fists clenched together. The energy in Diana's body was like a sudden flood that could not be stopped. The energy in her body exploded, causing the surrounding weather to change. The accumulation of thousands of years of divine power was a terrifying number that could not be calculated. The terrible energy that should have been on the firstborn's head turned a corner and fell on Doomsday's head. Thea wanted to stop it at first, but she gave up after thinking about it. Accumulating this energy for a long time would not do her much good. Doomsday would probably be her biggest enemy in the next 2 years. It was not a bad thing to let Diana vent her anger. If Doomsday could read minds and speak, he would definitely curse. It was easy to talk while standing. What was not a bad thing? This was so bad. Diana, who directly used a big move, naturally attracted his attention. This power that even the gods had to retreat made Doomsday tremble a little. Especially now that he was severely injured by Miss Thea, he did not even have a good balance. In the face of Diana's attack that almost broke the air, he could only stagger and use his left hand to block it. At this time, the energy skyrocketed. His hair was completely scattered, and his eyes turned golden. Doomsday's counterattack was weak and ridiculous in Diana's eyes. Pushing away the opponent's counterattack, Diana was like a divine punishment from heaven. She punched Doomsday's ugly and deformed head. Then she quickly turned behind him and raised Doomsday with both hands. The golden energy surged, and she hit his waist hard with her knee. Crack! With a loud explosion, Doomsday's waist was broken. Although his body cells were recovering rapidly, he could not stand up in a short time. The political leaders and superheroes of various countries who could see this scene cheered. Batman naturally felt a chill in his back and subconsciously covered his old waist. Diana was a warrior, not a knight. It was impossible for her to let the opponent go just because he could not stand up. Her whole body was shining with golden light. She was like a tiger coming down the mountain, punching and kicking Doomsday. Doomsday, who never knew what failure was stunned. Diana's short burst of energy exceeded his current limit. Doomsday's destruction was in front of him. Chapter 513. The officials in the White House cheered when they saw this scene. A terrible crisis seemed to be turning around, which made them secretly happy. Ordinary people had nothing. If they died, so be it. They were different. In order to climb to their current position, they had sacrificed many things. If they were killed by some killing monster, they would feel wronged no matter how they thought about it. Now, the big monster was about to be killed by the heroes. Although these heroes' abilities were a little unusual, they could still communicate. The people represented by the president had already started to think about the future from a political point of view. The only person in the White House who was unhappy was Luthor. How is this possible? Doomsday is going to lose? They're actually so powerful. As he spoke, Luther did not treat himself as an outsider. He casually took a piece of paper from the president's desk and lowered his head to calculate. We still need to evolve as a whole 3 times before we can defeat this woman? Luther felt that he had lost a bunch of hair as he muttered to himself. What the hell? This thing can continue to evolve? The officials who were thinking from a political point of view immediately shrank back and looked at the problem from a human survivor's point of view. What are we waiting for? Let's kill it quickly. The president had lost count of how many times he had spoken to Thea today. Previously, Thea's phone was damaged in the battle. After all, her blue battle armor was impressive, but Zeus did not design a place for a phone on the battle armor. Naturally, she could only use it whenever she wanted to. Now, every time she used a phone, it was sent to her by FBI agents who risked their lives. It was really not the time to talk nonsense. The president only briefly asked about Thea's injuries before bringing up the problem of how to kill Doomsday. Luther said that this thing will be invincible after 3 more evolutions. Do you have any other methods now? Thea did not comment on his words. Luther probably did not know that Doomsday would be a handicapped person from now on. The Sword of Victory and Oath had broken its hand from the principal level. Without the participation of the main gods, who could not be mentioned by name or at the level of Zeus, its hand would never grow back. We have a way to completely destroy it, but it will take some time. Sigh, I'm coming. Thea hung up the phone. Batman had returned with a spear made of kryptonite. Superman, who was recuperating on the star, also landed majestically. Unfortunately, there was nothing for him to do here. Under Diana's wild attacks, the speed of Doomsday's cell repair was far slower than the speed of damage. Doomsday's body was riddled with holes, and it was rubbed against the ground like a rag. They looked at the green kryptonite spear in Batman's hand. Who would deal the final blow? Superman and Supergirl's faces turned green. It wasn't an adjective green, but a real green. Even if they didn't touch such a large piece of kryptonite with their skin, the 2 of them would still feel dizzy and their legs would cramp. The 2 of them could only reject this noble mission. Batman, it's better if you do it. This is a matter for humans. Thea pulled Diana, who had just finished her energy outburst. The Valkyrie's outburst had also put a heavy burden on her body. Only her body could withstand such extraordinary power. An ordinary person would only end up exploding and dying. Master Bat didn't refuse. Relying on his unparalleled dodging skills, he walked closer to Doomsday with the spear in his hand. Doomsday, who had been ravaged, almost didn't look like a human anymore. His whole body was covered in wounds, his eyes were blinded, and his lower body was twisted at a very strange angle. The only arm he had left seemed to want to grab Batman. His cells were still trying to evolve, but after being beaten up by Diana, his body became more and more deformed. Master Bat nimbly dodged the claw and stepped on Doomsday's neck. He held the spear tightly with both hands and stabbed it into Doomsday's head. Even if Doomsday was reduced to such a miserable state, Batman shouldn't have been able to kill him. However, the power of kryptonite offset Doomsday's strong skin. This biochemical weapon made from Kryptonians wasn't perfect after all. Under Batman's powerful strength, the kryptonite spear penetrated Doomsday's brain inch by inch and finally pierced through. Doomsday, who had a strong vitality, was still struggling as if he didn't want to accept the fact that he had failed. Unfortunately, his efforts were all in vain in the face of the kryptonite. His cells were degraded by the kryptonite, and this speed became faster and faster as his resistance weakened. In the end, this monster, which symbolized the end of all races, reached the end of its life. Countless chaotic consciousnesses began to disappear, and the deformed head gradually lost its vitality under the influence of the kryptonite spear. Then, it was the body and limbs. Doomsday ushered in his own destruction. His twisted left arm shook wildly as if he was trying to grab something. The heavy arm finally welcomed death. It hit the ground heavily, creating a cloud of smoke. He was dead. Ouch. The girls were exhausted. Even Supergirl, who was in a good state, sat on the ground. If Superman's resistance to kryptonite was -99, then Supergirl's resistance was -100. Before today, she didn't know about the existence of kryptonite. Just being affected by the spectrum of kryptonite made her feel weak. Diana was also exhausted. The energy that far exceeded the capacity of her body made her sit on the ground weakly. Thea wasn't in a good state either, but she was more or less pretending. She wasn't as weak as she looked. Now that Doomsday was killed, it was a good thing. She didn't need to take out the kryptonite weapon and sealing device that she had prepared. Otherwise, it would be hard to explain why she had prepared these things. She secretly checked the spiritual space. The Order's scale was very satisfied with her behavior and gave her a large amount of willpower. It could be said that she was one step closer to the wall of origin to hook up with the source. The so-called big shot finally arrived at the end of the battle, just like in the movies. The person who came was the vice president, whom Thea had met a few times. Compared to the official business with the president, the vice president and Moira could still form a little friendship. The two of them were alumni who graduated from the same school. Accompanying him was naturally Amanda, who had a big heart and wasn't afraid of death. Is this thing really dead? The vice president was most concerned about this question. He didn't feel it when he was far away. Now that he was so close, looking at this 10-meter-tall deformed monster, he felt a chill run down his spine. Thea went up and kicked it twice, indicating that this thing was indeed dead. The vice president secretly wiped his sweat. Thinking of the mission, he asked in a somewhat tentative tone, "This corpse?" Thea spread her hands to show that she didn't care. Superman and Batman on the side objected in unison. In the original timeline, Doomsday and Doomsday died together. However, at this time when Thea was messing around, the young lady felt that Doomsday died before he could even see Superman. Superman shut himself in the sun for half an hour. When he came out, he found that the enemy was on his last breath. He only knew that the enemy was dead after he achieved great success. In fact, he was quite depressed. Chapter 5:14. It was only after he mastered the divine skill that he realized that the enemy was already dead. It was similar to the situation of Huang, who wrote the 9-yin Sutra. The only difference was that Superman could still live for a long time. Although he did not fight Doomsday, he still recognized this thing. Now that he was facing the American government who wanted Doomsday's corpse, he rejected it without thinking. This thing came from my home. It shouldn't exist on Earth. Batman, who had taken the last hit and got an honorable kill, also objected to the government taking Doomsday's corpse. Such a dangerous thing should be thrown into outer space. Among the four of them, Amanda was the main one. She did not give in to Batman at all. Seeing that their hatred was almost done, Thea made the final decision. "Mr. Vice President, this creature is too dangerous. It should be put into the depths of space and never be allowed to appear on Earth." To be honest, as a politician, the vice president did not like these things that he did not understand and could not control. He pretended to fight for it and explained to the other parties. In the end, he just let it go. The three women were all exhausted. The difficult task of throwing Doomsday's corpse into the depths of the universe was handed over to Superman. Seeing that Superman packed up Doomsday's corpse and took it away, the rest of the people dispersed. A battle that might have far-reaching effects finally came to an end. After Superman, several superheroes represented by Thea finally walked to the front of the stage. A new era was slowly but powerfully approaching everyone. In a secret underground base, Amanda, who was determined to be loyal to the country, was blindfolded and secretly brought here. "Commander Amanda, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to accept our inquiry. There were several people in the venue that Amanda had never seen before. They were all people in power who secretly controlled the lifeblood of the country and the world. The President of the United States was a joke here. They only retreated behind the scenes to maintain the so-called democracy system. Now that the situation was serious, they had to make a new assessment to ensure the continuation and wealth of their respective families. We don't trust the Heaven's Eye Society. This organization has been established for too long and has infiltrated too many parties. However, we trust you, Commander Amanda. First, we want to know who this woman is. The old man in the lead looked to be in his 80s, but he was in good spirits. He had a dignified air about him, and he was dressed meticulously. After he finished speaking, he tapped on the screen, and Diana, who was surrounded by golden energy, appeared on the screen. Amanda scoffed at their so-called trust. None of them were 3 or 4 years old. That was a lie. Whoever believed it would be a fool. Sending an unknown agent to investigate him and entering the secret room blindfolded, was this trust? However, Amanda's moral integrity was quite high. She wouldn't spit on the old man's face. Diana Prince. We know very little about this woman. On the surface, she's the person in charge of the Hepburn Foundation. Based on the analysis of her armor and shield, the Heavenly Eye Society has a deep connection with ancient Greece. Does she have any weaknesses? The old man asked. Amanda gave a faint smile. She's Dr. Thea Quinn's lover. If there's a weakness, that's her weakness. Thea's image appeared on the screen. She was wearing a silver-white battle armor and holding a long sword. The old man took a look. Does this billionaire have a weakness? Amanda held back her laughter. Her weakness is naturally Diana Prince. The old man was almost angered to death. What the hell was this? You might as well not have said anything. Amanda, you must be unhappy that I'm investigating you, right? Another old woman in the room glanced at the old man with contempt. It was obvious that they weren't on good terms. The conflict between them could be traced back to 100 years. The old woman thought for a moment. We want to know their position. Commander Amanda, do you have any latest news? Diana has been working hard to eliminate discrimination and achieve equality between men and women. I'm sure no one has any objections to this policy. The few people in the room nodded. This wasn't a big deal. Countless politicians used this as a slogan and shouted it loudly. There were also countless ambitious people who devoted themselves wholeheartedly to it. In their eyes, this matter didn't conflict with their interests. Amanda pondered for a few seconds. As for Dr. Thea, the think tank of the Heaven's Eye Society has analyzed that she has mastered a lot of alien technology. She's consciously leading all of humanity into the interstellar era. She didn't mention that the Heaven's Eye Society was also debating about this issue. Thea's actions were almost undisguised. Anyone with half a brain could analyze it. There were those who supported it and those who disagreed. Relatively speaking, the younger agents were more supportive, while the older ones were more conservative. Amanda didn't reveal her position. Instead, she stood from a fair point of view and described the entire matter. In fact, the few old men in the room were the ones who didn't want to see the world change the most. However, the situation forced them to make a choice. They controlled the lifeline of the country and naturally didn't do it alone. Each of them had a huge family and network of connections. The actions of Miss Thea had actually shattered their inherent world. Their 10 fingers were not even on one side. Naturally, there were different opinions within the family. The older ones needed to be protected, and the younger ones' opinions couldn't be ignored. They were actually quite tired during this period. The leader of the old men saw that the topic had been diverted and tried to regain the initiative. Commander Amanda, what do you personally think about entering the interstellar era? Amanda was also the type of person who liked to court death. With her position, she didn't need to worry about these old men. Since you asked so sincerely, I'll be merciful and tell you. I personally support it. The danger of Earth is gradually increasing. I don't know what's causing it, but the trend of superpower criminals everywhere is very obvious. If we don't respond in time, the next step will be difficult to predict. The few old men didn't say anything. Other than playing tricks, they were a group of ordinary people. In the face of superpower criminals, they didn't have the ability to fight back. The few of them understood Amanda's subtext. Maintaining the current order into the interstellar era and absorbing the essence of extraterrestrial life might rely on various high-tech weapons, but they would still be at the top of the world. However, if they didn't move forward and didn't have the support of a huge amount of manpower and financial resources, they wouldn't be much stronger than ordinary people. It could be said that there weren't many choices left for them, and they didn't have much time. The monster that was destroyed in the metropolis, is it really impossible to destroy it with our current methods? Oh, I specifically asked Dr. Thea this question. Amanda paused for a moment. Dr. Thea told me a lot of things. This monster isn't from Earth, but from Superman's hometown. They named it Doomsday. This is a top biological weapon that has destroyed many planets. Chapter 5:15. After that, Amanda went on a rampage, saying that Earth was a Level 3 civilization and Krypton was a Level 8 civilization. She left a lot of space for these people to fill in the blank. The old guys' hearts turned cold. They repeatedly asked questions, not only about Thea and Diana, but also about Superman and Batman. Compared to their usual disguises, these superheroes were also maintaining their power to a certain extent, so they were somewhat relieved. However, the evil scientist on Earth made them worried. The one who attracted the most attention was naturally Luthor in this incident. With his huge financial resources and smart mind, he almost poked a hole in Earth. However, in order to balance the power of the superheroes, they had a tacit understanding. No one said anything about shooting Luthor. Even if they had uncontrollable intelligence, they still wanted to have more trump cards in their hand. Amanda quickly left the room and entered a few more people to be questioned, including the current president. Unlike a video call, a lot of things could be learned from face-to-face communication. What should we do next? After the questioning, the old man turned to look at the others. Let's absorb the Quinn family into our circle. Isn't Moira going to be the president? Let her be. As long as she joins us, her daughter and her daughter's close friends can also be used by us. The old woman threw out an idea that she had been thinking about for a long time. The few of them were a little silent. The president was not attractive to them, but accepting a new family was equivalent to dividing a large amount of benefits from their respective areas, which made them a little reluctant. Of course, they had another option, which was to absorb Bruce Wayne into their circle. Batman's true identity was not difficult to find out, but they had more concerns. Moira was a politician, so she could talk to them, communicate, and exchange benefits with them. Batman was purely a superhero. If he was dissatisfied with something and flipped the table, the consequences would be very serious. It was not difficult to choose between dealing with a superhero or dealing with a superhero's mother. Discrimination between men and women also played a role. They did not know that the young lady had strengthened her mother. They generally thought that the middle-aged woman, Moira, was easier to deal with than Batman, who could use 127 types of fighting technique. After they reached a preliminary agreement, they left. Thea, who watched the live video through the military network, was secretly pleased. As she once told Sebastian, the non-existent, it was too easy for her to do bad things without the constraints of family and friends. Due to the difference in technology, Gideon had long gained access to the military network. During the Doomsday War, Gideon had rewritten some of Red Whirlwind's code. Judging from its ownership, this black technology product of the military was already under her control. These people in power thought that their actions were covert, but in fact, Thea had been watching them from the beginning of the meeting. The result was similar to what she had expected. With her and Diana or Green Arrow, there was no obstacle to Moira's advancement. As long as there was no big news, the White House would definitely prepare a bedroom for her 2 years later. For the next few days, Thea was surrounded by a pile of chores. The metropolis was hit hard again. In the past, there was the Luther group, but now she was the only large group left. Money had long lost its meaning to her. Although the young lady did not need to stand on the top of the mountain and shout for everyone's approval to become the Hokage, she urgently needed the wish power generated by the gratitude of ordinary citizens. It was the same as in the previous years. Those who did not have a house would build a house, those who did not have food would be given free food, and those who were injured would get the best treatment. Oliver basically let the construction group in his hands grow freely. Thea was not polite to him, and directly pulled the construction team to build a simple house. The citizens of the metropolis were very experienced. Whether it was the battle between Superman and Zod 18 months ago, or the several small-scale battles against Superman, including the battle between the 3 women and Doomsday, many people hid in the basement at first and came out after dawn. So basically, it was a loss of property. Some of the sharp-eyed people in the crowd felt that Thea was very similar to the figure of the woman holding the sword, but the young lady neither admitted nor denied it. She stood at the front of the stage and accepted everyone's worship. She was not thick-skinned enough, and Diana did not like to be disturbed in her daily life. Both of them chose to keep a low profile. Supergirl wanted to show off, but unfortunately, Superman blabbered on and on about hiding her identity and living a normal life. The little girl pitifully continued to wear her old-fashioned glasses to school. Before knowing that Luther was going to be transferred to a secret place, Thea decided to meet him. Luther, who was wearing a prison uniform and had shaved his head bald, looked much more energetic than before. At this time, he was sitting in the prison, full of energy, waiting for something. "Looks like you're looking good." The invisible Thea walked out directly. Luther was not surprised by her sudden appearance. He looked behind her and pursed his lips. Superman does not have this ability. Is this the ability of the Protoss? Originally, she just wanted to see him. She did not expect to receive new information. Thea's tone became more serious. Protoss? Why did you specifically use this word? The two of them looked at each other. Luther pondered for a long time before speaking. "I'm not you. I don't have so many alien friends. I only infer based on the clues I know." Thea nodded and motioned for him to continue. "There is one Protoss in the universe, or two?" Luther looked carefully at Thea's eyes, but he could not find anything. "One of them provided me with a lot of key technology for Doomsday. If I'm not wrong, you are from the other side? I just don't understand. Why do you pay attention to Earth? What do you need here?" Thea fell into silence. Luther said a lot of things without guessing. He could rely on words that could not even be considered clues to make up something that was similar to the truth. This person's intelligence could be said to be heaven-defying. As for Thea, Luther said that she was also a Protoss. He knew her well. The young lady was quite beautiful. After thinking about it, it was not something that could not be mentioned. He immediately said, "Earth is very important. Its importance is far beyond imagination. As for the Protoss, I can only say that your guess is right. There are indeed 2 Protoss. We call them the new Protoss. One of them is righteous and the other is evil. The one who taught you knowledge should be the evil new god. You really know a lot of things. Why did they teach me to create Doomsday?" Luther thought about this question for a long time but could not figure it out. At first, he thought that the other party had bad intentions, but no matter how he verified, the knowledge was not fake. Doomsday was created as expected. Other than putting himself in prison, Luther could not figure out what the other party was plotting against him. There were no clues at all. No matter how high his intelligence was, it was useless. Now that he had caught Thea, this wise person, he had to ask. Chapter 5:16. Thea didn't know what the Wasteland Wolf was up to. There was no need for her to brag, so she shook her head. My sister is still young, you. Luther wanted to say something, but Thea had already left. Seeing that Luther wasn't too annoying, Thea gave up on her plan to buy out the entire Luther group after leaving the secret prison. Instead, she decided to buy out the key departments separately. The Luther group was in a very bad situation. Their liquid funds had already been used up, and the chairman had committed an unforgivable crime. The Cadmus project, which Luther had spent a lot of money on, had been seized by the government for treason, crimes against humanity, and 26 other crimes. It sounded nice, saying that after the truth was found out, a portion of the money would be returned to the Luther family according to the relevant laws. However, anyone with a discerning eye knew that it was a lie. Thea brought up her plan to buy out the Luther group, and Luther's mother very frankly admitted defeat. The two quickly finalized the agreement. Several high-tech and new energy-related departments were all bought out by Thea, and Luther's remaining widows and orphans also received the funds they desperately needed. They were no longer in the miserable situation of selling their house and sleeping in a hotel. Both sides were very eager to complete the deal before the government and other business competitors reacted. In just 3 days, the two sides completed the deal. Thea bought out half of the Luther Group's assets at a slightly higher price, and all of them were the most technologically advanced parts. As for how the widows and orphans would deal with the blood-sucking elites from all walks of life, Thea didn't have to worry about that. She quickly integrated all kinds of resources, and the people in the group were ordered around by her. She quickly completed the separation and integration of the various departments and the placement of new employees. As the world's #1 high-tech group, Sia finally launched the new plan that she had been planning for a long time. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the plan I specially made for the future of the group. In order to cope with the increasing number of global crises, the Quinn Group will integrate the essence of the world's technology, take advantage of the Earth's human population, and create the ultimate human weapon for the new era. Thea gestured for the secretary to pass the proposal to the heads of the relevant departments, including her #1 henchman, Felicity. After the secretary was cured by her, she had nowhere to go for a while. Only then did Thea know that the secretary was loyal to Luther, not his family. Luther couldn't come out for 2 or 3 years, so it was impossible for her to spy on his secret. 2 years later, Thea would be in a higher position, so she didn't have to worry about the secretary's betrayal. She calmly hired Miss Maisie, and the secretary was also familiar with the job. In just 2 days, she pushed Thea's original secretary aside. Miss Maisie didn't disappoint her old subordinate who had been with her for several years. She found a department with real power and put her in charge. Now, the secretary handed the documents to everyone in the meeting room skillfully. Pacific Rim Plan? The few supervisors were a little stunned. This title was a little big. Thea explained as she showed them. Gather the existing forces to build a giant mecha that is 100 meters tall and weighs 1,000 tons. It will be driven by nuclear power and equipped with electromagnetic weapons, missiles, powerful physical weapons, and even nuclear weapons when necessary. As for the mecha pilot, we will take advantage of the large number of humans. 2 or 3 pilots with similar brainwaves will be assigned to connect their floating neurons to control these giant. Select pilots from all over the world and carry out data matching and screening. Our company will develop the first generation of trial mecha. I expect to do the preliminary test in a month. Do you have any other questions? Sia gave them a brief rundown of what had happened. The people in the meeting room were the technical backbone of the company. To some extent, they represented the highest level of research and development on Earth today. Thea's giant mecha didn't exceed the current technology by much, but once it was put into operation, it would cause a huge sensation. Thea's superhero identity was a little vague. Those who knew about it knew, but those who didn't were skeptical. The plan in front of them was from the perspective of ordinary people. Once a few technical difficulties were solved, the huge number of people on Earth might really give humans a powerful weapon. Ordinary people can control such a huge robot? Felicity asked after the meeting. The former hacker had no resistance to these technological products. Now, her eyes were shining. Of course, this is the best weapon I've thought of. A stone stirred up 1,000 ripples. 2 hours after her plan was announced, a few observant people saw the full text of the plan. In an old house full of vicissitudes of history, a few elders had a meeting again. That professor is starting to speed up. This wasn't hard to see. Thea's steps were very obvious. She was starting to speed up the entire human civilization, regardless of whether the other party was willing or not. The few old men were a little grinning. It's a good thing just looking at the plan. If it succeeds, we can also get rid of the predicament of being controlled by superheroes. I think we should support it, a rather dignified middle-aged man said. Such a huge steel beast can only be created by super-large corporations or a few strong countries. It's impossible to hide such a huge thing. It's impossible to eliminate the possibility of private and illegal corporations creating it. The few of them analyzed from their own perspectives. In the end, they miraculously found that this Pacific Rim plan didn't harm them and even had many benefits. The faces of the politicians who were beneficial to them were exposed. Support her. In the next month, Thea and the entire corporation were very busy. At first, a few corporations with ulterior motives sent commercial spies to investigate carefully, but soon found that Thea didn't hide it at all. They couldn't be bothered to be petty and sent representatives to observe the scene. Quinn Corporation was very generous this time. They directly built a manufacturing factory on the outskirts of the metropolis. A huge amount of money was invested and thousands of tons of steel was used as the main material. A huge steel monster was gradually showing its magnificence. With Thea's own ability to create armor, coupled with the corporation's and Luther's technological reserves, the construction of the giant mech wasn't afraid of outsiders. The core technology was in her hands. From the outside, it looked like a huge toy that had been magnified countless times. Thea was using her power to suppress others. Other than a limited number of countries, no one or organization could compete with her in this field. Her plan was simple. She would integrate the world's resources and create 50 of these giant mechs. Then, humans would have the basic capital to communicate with the galaxy. Otherwise, it would be inappropriate to talk to aliens with F-22s. In the future, whether it was the interstellar era or the war against Darkseid, humans shouldn't be spectators. They should watch superheroes fight to the death while they hid in a corner, trembling and praying to unknown gods. Instead, they should do their part. Chapter 5:17. A month later, in a valley on the outskirts of the metropolis, the trial run of the ultimate weapon of mankind in the new era by the Quinn Group had finally begun. After several rounds of selection, the final candidates turned out to be the sisters, Laurel Lance and Sarah Rice. Thea was not too surprised by this result. After all, compared to ordinary people, superheroes who had undergone rigorous training, even if they were ordinary superheroes, had far more willpower and reaction speed than ordinary people. Now, Laurel, who had started training several years in advance, and Sarah, who had trained hard in the Assassin League for several years, were about to blossom into their own glory. The 80-meter-tall, 1,500-ton supergiant mech began its high-profile trial run under the control of the sisters. The mech slowly stood up with its arms on the ground, and its huge weight caused the airflow to change. A violent wind blew through the entire valley, and many nearby trees were blown down. The political leaders who were watching this scene remotely in the metropolis began to whisper to each other. A minute passed. After some ground simulation training in advance, the coordination and synchronization of the sisters, who were skilled in martial arts, began to improve. As they gradually familiarized themselves with the control of the mech, today's other guest, Superman, appeared on time. The superheroes were generally supportive of humans having a greater ability to protect themselves. Except for Batman, who was worried that this would deepen the bullying of small countries by powerful countries, everyone else's opinion was basically positive. Enemies like Zod and Doomsday appeared one after another. If the enemies they faced in the future were to become stronger and stronger, it would not be a bad thing for humans to have some resistance. Superman's task today was very simple. It was to test the attack and defense of the robot. In order to prevent the politicians from thinking too much, and not to belittle the results of her work, Thea calculated the maximum strength of a robot for 2 days. This value was equivalent to 20 to 30% of Superman's strength. Superman looked like a burly man, but in fact, his acting skills were not bad. After all, he switched back and forth between the two identities of Superman every day. His acting skills were not bad. The mech stretched out its arms and bent its legs in place. The sisters quickly familiarized themselves with the operation. After receiving the command from Thea at the console, they threw a punch at Superman with a huge amount of kinetic energy. In the face of the huge steel mech that was powered by nuclear power and composed of 50 power engines per muscle, Superman carefully suppressed his strength and also threw a punch. The disproportionate fists of the two sides collided, and the huge roar could be heard throughout the metropolis. Many people saw the live broadcast. The various values from the Quinn group quickly began to feed back. The theoretical value of the impact has reached 30,000 tons. The mech's power system has been affected by the impact. 9 engines have malfunctioned. The lower half of the mecha is stable. It can continue to fight. The shock absorption effect of the arm armor coating is only 90% of the expected. The heads of the various departments began to report their observation data separately. Thea nodded. The data did not exceed her expectations by too much. Overall, she was quite satisfied. She connected to the cockpit and asked, "Lance sisters, do you feel any discomfort?" The Lance sisters were driving as ordinary people, so she definitely couldn't call them Black Canary or White Canary. "We just started warming up." Unlike the hysterical and delicate girl on Purgatory Island, Sarah Lance now had the demeanor of the captain of tomorrow's legendary team after years of training. She was the one who took the initiative between the two sisters. The giant mech pulled out 2 short sticks from its arms. These 2 sticks were specially built according to the Lance sisters' habit. Each stick was 50 meters long and weighed 600 tons. The whole body was made of titanium alloy. The materials for these 2 sticks alone cost Thea $350 million. The giant mech skillfully waved the sticks, caught a flaw, and sent Superman flying like a fly. There was a burst of cheers at the scene, which made Louise Lane, who saw the scene, not know whether to laugh or cry. "My Superman didn't even use his full strength. Can't you see?" The dignitaries all stared at the screen. As laymen, they were secretly happy that Superman was killed, and worried that the cost of this weapon was too high. Unfortunately, their thoughts were all in vain. Although Superman was hit into the mountain, he was not hurt at all. He had never dealt with the Lance sisters, but he knew that they were not ordinary citizens. The battle intent in his heart was slightly released, and the two sides fought back and forth. Is the situation really that bad? Everyone in the conference room was focused on the screen, and Bruce Wayne whispered to Thea. The young lady was now dragging the humans to climb the technology tree. With his IQ, it was not difficult to find the problem. Remember the Omega symbol you mentioned to me last time? I went to see Luthor a few days ago. From his analysis, we are being targeted by a terrifying race. Many of the key knowledge of Doomsday were taught to Luthor by this race. Our world is very dangerous, Thea said in a low voice. There were many people at the scene, so the two just said a few words and went their separate ways. The battle in the valley was still going on as usual. The Lance sisters relied on their skillful martial arts to fully display the abilities of their mecha. This valley, which usually attracted many outdoor enthusiasts on weekends for rock climbing adventures, was completely destroyed by their battle. Okay, Lance sisters, stop. Thea saw that the mech's damage had exceeded 20% and hurriedly stopped them. This was a waste of money. The two sisters successfully stopped the mech. Superman did not continue to pester them. This was originally an experiment to boost the morale of the humans and reduce their hostility towards him. He destroyed the mech, which had no practical use other than to deepen the fear of ordinary people towards him. Superman flew away with a whoosh. In less than 2 minutes, Clark, with his old-fashioned eyes, returned to the scene as if nothing had happened. Thea glanced at Superman, who was intimate with Louise again, and did not say anything. This guy's destructive power was too great. The mech's energy consumption and various parts of the mech would require at least 700 to 800 million USD to repair. Although she had acquired half of Luther Group's quality department, and the group's share price had risen greatly, Thea still felt a little distressed about this unplanned expense. Wool comes from sheep, so she immediately began to transfer the financial pressure to them. Countries like the United States cried every day that they had no money, but in fact it was all an act. Thea's goal was to sell it to them. Generals, what do you think? Sia asked a few old men in military uniforms with a faint smile. She didn't need to use a heavy hammer. Her intention was clear. If the United States did not buy it, other countries would buy it. At least on the surface, this was a weapon that could compete with Superman. The advantages of the giant mech were undeniable. Ordinary people could operate it, and the weapon system was within the scope of understanding. Although the cost of production was high enough to give people a heart attack, a problem that could be solved with money was not a big problem for them. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.